The time has come once again to speak as witches and wizards do. I'm Daniel Dubois,
And I'm Michaela Gaffin-Stone.
and we're your hosts for the Think Like a Wizard podcast. Welcome to Season 3, Episode 2, with the great title of It's Not What You Think It Is.
I think that covers most of our episodes, but this one in particular.
Yeah. Well, there's a few things that happen behind the scenes, so listeners, you'll see what kind of episode it turns out being. So I think the reason I called it that is because I kind of wanted to follow up on a bit of advice that we gave to our guest Willa last week, and is that don't let your expectations get in the way because it's not what you think it is. As in this whole spiritual magical thing has a lot like well one right you're kind of loaded with a false impression from stories, popular fiction, and then the way your brain germinates from that. But it's really a lot more subtle and in some ways a lot more powerful than you would think because of its subtlety. It almost reminds me of not that this might not necessarily help the listeners, but like when I was young, if for those of you who've seen the first Star Wars movie, right? Darth Vader's one of his subordinates makes fun of him for being a Jedi, well, for using the Force, right? Saying it's an old antiquated old religion. And Darth Vader makes the statement of it's more powerful even than, this Death Star they're on that can destroy planets. And I thought to myself watching the movie, right? Of course, there's the limitation of technology at the time for special effects. But it's like, how is using the Force more powerful than something that can blow up a planet? I mean, and then in later installments of Star Wars, you kind of get a sense of how powerful it is. But really, because you're dealing with forces that deal with the structure of things, how things flow. It's not that it's necessarily a world-ending threat or anything like that, but it can change lives, completely for good or for bad, depending on what you do with it or how well you understand it.
Absolutely. And we also referred to the chosen path, the path that you think you're on, as being not necessarily what you think it is. And that speaks to not needing to know how you're going to do the thing or how it's going to look or how it's all going to turn out. None of these things are important. And if you focus on them, what happens is you're distracted away from all the potential, all the other paths that are there.
Mm-hmm.
So the open-mindedness, the preparedness to discover something, um, all those things that, you hear it said, but consider it. And really, how open are you? Or are you open as long as it looks this way? Or open as long as it works that way? This is the thing where you really need to put that down, give it a seat somewhere and sort of say, okay, but if I didn't know that, or I didn't think that way, what else could it be? Because chances are it's not what you think it is.
Yes. And a topic I was not loath to broach. That's completely wrong way of saying it, but it does give the drama I want. Is that this very day it came to a culmination, a thought, or an understanding because this whole topic of it's not what you think it is. So, for those of you who have heard me talk about this before, I don't even like gendering. I use gender neutral language whenever possible because I want people to be able to put themselves in a situation or see their situation in it without having preconceived notions loaded into it. And even when I work with, spiritual mystical forces, I don't break it down into male and female energies. I break it down into knowing and doing. And I also look at, well, I mean, this podcast specifically, right, is for anybody who wants to listen. Doesn't matter, male, female, intersex, whatever, the whole gambit, you want to talk about. And so I looked at also how I teach people as the same as that, only to realize today that things were not what it seemed to be. Or I should say more specifically, things were not as I had planned them to be or had anticipated them to be. So this will be, I'll put this out there because I'm also going to be recording another podcast later with someone else and as a guest. And I want this podcast to have the first on this. So it turns out what I thought was me prepping to be basically teaching everybody in a gender neutral way is that actually, with all the clues that have been missing over the years, is that it's actually my job to join the bandwagon and teach women about
Oh,
the feminine divine, or how to harmonize, more specifically, how to harmonize that with the with the male divine. And
okay.
it's hard for two women to teach each other the how to mix with the male divine when you have no male divine energies, when you don't have that same depth of male divine energy. This is why for years I stayed away from it, right? Because it's like, I'll use this analogy, right? And we'll get scientific a little bit. The body has needs estrogens and androgens to build a body and to maintain a body. Although estrogens are considered female hormones and androgens are considered male hormones, but you still need both of them.
Okay.
So the same thing, even though we as a species are generally divided male and female, we still have both the male and female divine energies in us. And you really notice it when that balance is different, right? When a female has more of the divine male energy and a male has more of the divine female energy, you kind of notice it in their behavior and it kind of sticks out. So that's one of the reasons why I never like to break it down to male and female, right? Because listen, these can exist in both. Nothing gets created without both energies, or both, yeah. And things can't be created without both energies.
Hmm. Interesting. I see. I like to play with
Mm.
both sides simply
Yeah,
because you can't have one without the other,
right.
really. It's like day, night, left, right, light, dark,
Hmm.
yin, yang, like pick a thing. There's always both, and both are equally valuable. They're just different. So having a harmony between them is the optimal and the ultimate power, really, because you divide and conquer, right? If you have those two things separate and kept separate, then they are less than they can be when they're in
Right.
harmony. So that's a whole other area to play in and investigate like what else can you do that you require somebody else for to
Yeah.
to be in partnership with. It's not that you're using another person. That's definitely not your best route. But having somebody who is partnering in a practice or a direction or some other way, however you choose that, that can be really valuable. And gender, I don't know that it's so much the gender as the type of energy that that
Yeah.
person has dominant. And, I know a couple where he has a pretty strong feminine side and she has a fairly decent masculine side, and they're a couple and they're very
Right.
happy together, but their balance is not quite what you would typically expect to see. However, it works
Yes.
perfectly for them, and
Hmm.
together they're very strong.
Well, that's the thing, right? Because I thought about the word balance for a long time for the last few days, and as an artist, I should have come up with this right away. But there is symmetrical balance and asymmetrical balance, but they're both balance. So, like, even if you look at an individual, right, there's a point where they'll be using more of the divine feminine, and times they'll be using more of the divine masculine. So, the balance doesn't come from everything always being in stasis or having the same values. It's the overall exchange of energy being in balance and not statically in balance at one point. And then I want to add on to that it's the harmony between the two as well.
I was going to say, that's why I prefer the word harmony.
Yes.
So, for example, when it comes to, the very popular thing that people talk about, work-life balance. Yes, let's have work-life balance. Well, good luck. I would
Mm.
love to see what that looks like because balance means literally that it's the same on either side. It's an equal amount or an equal
Right.
quantity or however you want to measure it, it's equal. And that is not possible in your work life situation. It just isn't. But a harmony, now that's
Yes.
a different thing. Harmony can be sometimes you got to work more and have a little less life outside of
Hmm.
work. But then to maintain harmony, you need to shift that so that
Yes.
sometimes you're working less and having more of your life outside of work. And it's an ebb and flow. It's not static at all because we are not static beings. It doesn't
No.
work that way. We're not on the planet to be static. We're in the spiritual world. We're not static. Nothing is static. So we might try and make it so, but it just isn't that way. So harmony, the ebb and flow, and having a good match, if you will, is really the ideal, I would say.
Yeah.
But the balance thing, it's a term we like to use, but when you actually look at what it means, it doesn't really fit.
Right. And I think, from a parental perspective, I think a lot of parents can see themselves in this, right? There's when one parent gets too soft, the other parent gets too disciplinarian. And when one parent becomes too disciplinarian, the other person becomes too soft. And then you end up with balance, but you have no harmony. And that's no good for the children, right? In that, because there's no understanding how to make things work. There's just, all you know is there's a reaction to what one does. And the reaction can be aggressive, you know, and then
Yeah,
there's no peace and there's no harmony, all things you're looking for when you have balance.
and what happens with that particular example?
Mm.
What happens then is the person who's receiving the effects of that stronger one and weaker one,
Mm.
or softer and harsher, or however you want to use the terminology for that,
Mm.
the person who's receiving that will learn to manipulate the one that they want for the
Mm.
thing
Yes.
they need them for. So, if dad said no, go to mom. If mom said no, go to dad.
Yeah.
But that kind of thing, kids learn that as soon as they can talk and probably sooner, and it's a basic human thing. So it's not, again, it's not your best bet to have that sort of I'm all this and you're all that. And I think when it comes to gender as well, okay, you might want to identify as male and you
Mm.
feel male and you look male and sound male and all those things.
Hmm.
Cool. But there's aspects that are probably more feminine than you would have anticipated when you were a
Yeah.
teenager, for example. And likewise for women, women typically it's harsher for women, I think. If you show up as somebody who's assertive, you're called
Hmm.
aggressive. If you show up as somebody who's confident, you're bossy. And the terminology gets shifted, and that squashes, or it's intended to squash, a strength that
Yeah.
woman has that doesn't fit the narrative. It shifts the balance, right?
Hmm.
Think of the term the balance of power. Well, have you
Yeah.
ever known power to be balanced? Because
No,
the very
that's
nature of
actually a
it,
great example
the
because
very
there's never a
nature of
balance
it
of
is not
power,
balanced.
right? And there's always someone trying to undermine the power so they can
There's
get it for
somebody
themselves.
There's somebody who's trying to hang on to it. There's
Yeah.
somebody who's trying to pull it away. There's
Hmm.
somebody who's trying to break it. There's somebody who's trying to grasp it. It's in a state of flux, but it's not, there's no balance of power. That doesn't exist.
You know what? Saying that, one of the things I was thinking of saying in the introduction, but I had completely forgotten about, was I was going to say, even though we pre-record, these episodes are pre-recorded, this is actually election day in the States when we're recording this. But I was going to make the joke of that, yeah, this is the first episode in whatever hellscape your consequences of your voting have brought you, because this will come out after whoever won takes residence in the White
Yep.
House and takes over the duties.
Yep. So there's a lot of push and pull going on today,
Yeah.
and I can feel the energy. I have a friend and colleague who lives in Lithuania, and she
Hmm.
can feel the energy. So, it's palpable, and I
Oh
am
yes.
staying intentionally clear of all news. I am not paying attention to it. I voted like 10 days ago.
Mhm.
Um, I do not need to know the machinations of things right now, but what I do know, it's people trying to yell louder than the other people, and everybody's doing it. And
Yeah.
it's a push-pull of power that people want to control, and it's not theirs to control. Like you have your part, you can vote. But once
Hmm.
you've done that, the rest goes according to the machine. And you can't do anything more than that, but you can work to hold the people accountable, hopefully, once
Yes.
they're and much will depend on who that is, as to what that's going to look like. But where I
Yeah.
live in the town I live in, we have a local community chatter thing on Facebook.
Right.
And I looked at that this morning. That was my first mistake for the day. Uh,
Yeah.
and somebody said, "So, is the Civil War starting today?" It's like, okay, that's the tone we've got. I'm out. And
Hmm.
so I kind of didn't continue.
Yeah.
Um, but it's all about power right now, and there is no balance. There won't be any balance regardless of who's decided what's happening. Half the country is
You
going to
know,
be unhappy. So I suppose you could say this is balance. Half the country is going to be unhappy, and half the country is going to be happy.
well,
Just depends on who's which side
mhm.
as to how bad it's going to be.
And speaking of things aren't what they seem to be, people, regardless of who wins, the people who voted for those people are in for a rude awakening,
Yes.
because this may be your person that you voted in, but there was a lot of things you weren't paying attention to that were being said out in the open.
Oh, yes. Yes. And I have been asking questions of both sides for weeks. And not once have I had oh no, once. Once I had an answer that actually was the kind of answer I was looking for. Um, and my questions weren't complex, or at least they shouldn't have been. I was asking people that I knew
Hmm.
were on either side. I asked them the same question, which was, what is good about your candidate that you think is worth voting for? And once, out of weeks of asking this, way more often than probably I should
Hmm.
have, of many people, once I had an answer. And that's literally that answer actually came today. So pretty wild.
Yeah.
And I don't think I'll go into it just because I don't know
Well,
who's coming.
this will be nostalgic for the people listening to it when this episode airs. Like, oh, I remember those days before people we didn't have an answer.
Yeah, no, it was pretty wild. Well, the person the response was one of the candidates
Hmm.
will fight for your right to disagree. One of them
Yeah,
won't. That's all I'm saying on that subject.
yeah. Well, you mentioned that, and that's exactly the point I was thinking about, because both parties are looking to take away your right to disagree.
Well, I think one is going to be a little more obvious than the other, perhaps.
Yes, that's the thing, but there has been speeches and panels happening behind the scenes that no one's paying attention to, and both parties are trying to find an end run around the First Amendment.
Hmm, interesting.
Yeah,
Well, we'll see how that plays out, but choices are limited, and that's one of the reasons why stress today for most people is very high, and there's a lot of, that basic human need of a sense of safety is definitely compromised. There is no
yeah.
balance and there is no harmony. This is not a thing right now. So again, that's why I'm doing okay because I'm not getting into it. I have
Yeah.
done what I can do, and then I have bowed out of that whole scene because there is no value to me being in it. And
Mm,
I'm intentionally not working on manipulating anything in the spiritual realm.
mm,
I'm not doing any spells. I'm not doing anything like that because there is more at play here than I am aware of, and I know enough
right.
to know that. So I am not going to stick my fingers in an unknown pie.
Mm.
It's
Which
not
is good.
wise.
Which is good.
Uh-huh. So I'm,
And
I'm
yeah.
intentionally not messing with that because it's a question that um, is a fair one to ask. It's like, well, if you are in the spiritual realm at all, or
Hmm.
you use witchcraft or anything, why aren't you doing something to affect the outcome? It's like, oh boy, can you imagine what that unleashes? If everybody who's doing what we do, or something
Yeah.
similar to it, or on their own path like that, if
Hmm.
everybody started doing that, we would have Armageddon in a fairly big way. Like it would
Yeah.
not go well. So no, I'm not getting into that either.
Well, there's for sake of narrative, I found some fiction writers are kind of cluing into the concept that supernatural intervention isn't free.
No,
There's
it certainly
consequences
isn't.
to supernatural intervention,
Yep.
especially when something's intended to go another way and you try to alter that.
Hmm. Oh, you got to be really careful when you're playing with things unseen to make a difference in the
Mm.
scene. Um, the chances of that going the way you envisage are remote. It is literally not what it seems. That is a whole area of no, that's not going to show up the way you think it is.
Well, because it brings me to the point of, as part of things aren't what you would they seem. So there's a tendency to look at the supernatural like it's elusive, like it's tricksterish. When the reality is, it's just it looks that way because you don't understand, and you as the person observing don't understand enough. So when you experience it, you have to be brought down different paths to get to where you need to be. And so, like you said a few times now about the Buddha, you you are told what you need to hear to get you to where you need to go. And then when you get to where you need to go, now you need to hear a new thing.
Right.
So
Exactly.
you're following a path and you're thinking, okay, because this is a classic problem with me, and it's been used by the spirit world to put me down a lot of paths, even the one I mentioned today. And like we've discussed this, I've told you the story of, and I think I mentioned on the podcast, the woman with the jade stone. Well, the
Hmm.
person I thought was going to be the woman with the jade stone was the person who creates the jade stone. And then that jade stone gets transferred to someone else who then becomes the woman with the jade stone. But I wouldn't have looked at it that way, and I wasn't taught it that way. I was taught just focus on what you need to do because I played a part in making the jade stone in the first place. But had I known, I would have refrained and said, I just want to jump to get to the point I need to get to. And because of how I was saying about, you know, now I understand it's my job to help. I like to put it dramatically like this: the wielders of the feminine divine, to help them learn how to harmonize with the male divine. But and I'll talk about this journey a little bit because part of the things I always refused to do and also kind of refused to acknowledge because I didn't like how it presented itself was that when I would do my work in the shadows, my invisible work, my harmonies was always stronger with women because and a lot of these women were good wielders of the feminine divine. So you take the male divine and the feminine divine and you get more power out of it and you get more efficiency out of it. So my bonds with those people were stronger to the point where like I could regularly connect with them. Whereas when I worked with a male, two male divines, it's not like I didn't know what to do. And it's not like I didn't have information, but it was not the same connection. Like I'll give you this example. One woman I worked with, she was sick and she actually pulled me to sleep with her. Like not in like I was at my place, she was at hers, but she went to bed and then I was suddenly I just fell asleep. I was like sitting there and I could feel the drowsiness kick in and then I fell asleep and I talked to her the next day and I'm like, time did you go to bed last night? Because I could feel her presence, right? She goes, well, I went to bed at 7 and I'm going, yeah, that's what I thought you did because that's when I fell asleep, even though I was wide awake. but I could feel their presence and I could feel them grab me. And then when
Hmm.
they went to bed, they pulled me with them. But I
Did
don't
they
get
need
that
you for
when I'm
healing?
connected to males. What's that?
Did they need you for healing?
Yes. It
Okay.
was actually that was actually a big element to that one. There was a lot of physical ailments to be healed. And so I kind of acted as I want to say a template
Okay.
to help harmonize her energy. Actually, to the point of this is the first time where I've actually really ever done anything beyond sensory stuff, where I've actually ever really did anything really which you consider magical, because this person had a lot of back pain, and it was starting to overwhelm me, the back pain, her back pain. So the spirits goes, "Don't worry about it. We got something for you." And so the next day, even though like it wasn't something like you have to be spiritually aware to be aware of this, they gave me like a sphere, and I gave it to her, and I said, "Here, this is for you." And she's like, "What are you talking about?" I said, "I know you trust me. Just..." And when I handed it to her, she felt it, and I said, "Don't worry. Just let yourself absorb this." And then she was like, she felt it, but she didn't know what it was. And I was like, "Ah, there you go." Because then the pain got less in me, and then her pain had some relief to it. But that's the first time, like, where the spirit world actually went, "Okay, I know you're not looking to cast a spell or anything, but here's one. There you go. Give it to her."
It's a funny thing with spell
Yeah.
casting, but we all do it all the time.
Yeah.
It's just that there are some things that people have sort of made mystic and put
Yeah.
out of reach. But, in Christianity, there's prayers,
Mm-hmm.
and for witches, the spells. And there's in Buddhism, you have chants, for example, you have mantras that are
Right.
used. And all of these are spells. They alter things, even if it's
Yeah.
your state of mind. That is something significant that's altered because when your state of mind changes, how you behave changes. And that brings real results in the world. So,
Mm-hmm.
is that mundane? Yes. Is it a spell? Yes. It's both of those things. It Spells don't have to be something hocus pocus, jiggery
Right.
pocus, and all the rest of it, and then smoke appears and suddenly you've turned somebody into a toad.
Right.
That's and that's a good thing because frankly, the US would be overrun with toads right now. It'd be
Yeah.
pretty wild. The one of the plagues would be visiting us in a very big way.
Yeah.
So it's a good thing that that's not what it means. Um, and then there are things that you do that are at a higher level, and those are more difficult for people to comprehend in the everyday. So there's levels, if you will, of spells. But
Yes.
I'd love for the listener to appreciate that actually you do spells all the time. It's not it's not something to be afraid of. And again, to go with the theme today, it's literally not what you think. It's all around you. When you say something to another person to change their mind or to give them a new piece of information that they're going to act on, you just created something out of words. That is a definition of a spell. So, yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there because sometimes it's tempting, I think, for some listener is listening to this and they are tempted to think that this is not within their grasp. And it not only is it's something you're already doing, we're just opening more doors. That's all.
Yeah. Well, yes, that is the thing, right? Like even to extend it to Lucky Charms. If you grab yourself, well, right? Like I know around here bingo is popular. So a lot of people will bring their little whatever little I'm running out of English words here. I was
The
going to
well,
say the
charm
Lux
is good.
Venom, their little
Good luck thing.
yeah, their little good luck thing to try to bring luck to themselves, right? Or people like their rituals for sports. I
I was
think
going to say, look at
playoff
baseball.
time for hockey, no people don't shave their beards. Yeah,
Look at baseball. The people have more twitches and
yeah,
rituals and quirks going on. And if you watch somebody on the plate before they're gonna do their thing.
Yeah.
They're like scratching the side of their nose,
Hmm.
pulling their ear, like changing
Yes.
their socks or doing there's like a dozen things, and you're just sort of waiting. Are we ready
Hmm.
yet? And it's like, no, no, I have this
Yeah.
this whole sequence I gotta go through, and nobody thinks anything of it. Nobody thinks anything of it because it's become accepted in baseball that this is what they
Hmm.
do. And there are certain players in football, for example, who won't shave the whole time they're playing football. They won't shave during the season
Right.
because they won their first game wearing a beard. Like,
Yep.
okay. Or whatever it is. It could be odd shoes. You see kickers in American football and Canadian football
Mm.
where they've got odd shoes on. And there might be a size difference, color difference. There's like all kinds of things.
Mm.
What exactly is that? What's that
Yeah.
intended to do? It's intended to affect the outcome. It's intended to play with unseen forces, if you will,
Yes.
unseen strengths, and bring about a certain result. Well, is that not a spell?
Yep.
Kind of
Yeah,
is,
it's
right?
funny. I was trying to think. This happened several years ago, but it's probably happened more often than that. But I think it was a soccer game or football, if you will. But it was in South America, and they had gotten a shaman to come out down from the mountains to bless the field. But I don't think the team won that time. But that's because, right, magic doesn't just all fall into your favor. Everyone else is doing it too. So,
And who knows what their intention
yeah.
was toward the shaman,
Mm.
toward what was happening, who was invested in it, who wasn't. There's
Right.
there's all kinds of, that whole intention thing that we've talked about before.
Yes.
Where was their intention and what was the motivation for that intention? I mean, yes, you could say, well, they wanted to win, duh.
Hmm.
But okay, was somebody betting on it? Were they
Yeah.
wanting to win because they'd lost so many times, or were they wanting to win because they didn't like the other team? Like, there's a lot of different nuances there that could affect the
Yes.
outcome. But
Yeah. We've
spells are in so many places that
yeah.
they become accepted and then people don't see them anymore. They become invisible. Like the
Hmm.
whole ritual with the baseball player. I mean, that is utterly fascinating to me. I like to watch those with the sound off
Mm.
so I can really focus on
Yeah.
what's the next movement going to be and how frequently do they do it. And typically you can see that the person is in ritual, they are not in conscience. So they're
Yeah.
not thinking of what they're doing. They're just doing all these things and they're doing it with an energy of sort of, it's kind of frantic, right? Like, got to get through all of this before I can't do anything until I've done all of this.
Yeah.
This is a deeply ingrained ritual, and nobody sees it. I mean, they know it's there, but they don't see it for what it is. Isn't that
That's right.
fascinating?
Yeah. Well, it's, when you study religious people, but not like through, like an academic sense, but just look at them and watch them. One, you'll see the people who are saying, no, all that's evil. But then yet, right, they do their prayers, they do their rituals, they have their sacraments, they do all those things. It's like, well, what do you think those things are? Those are you using magic. You're confirming. It's it's why I say religion can be your introduction because everything's there.
Oh, yeah.
Because religion has all this stuff, but you're not immersed in the concept of you're the magician.
You're intentionally kept out of that actually
Yeah,
in religion. But I mean,
right.
Judaism has the Kabbalah. It's mystical
Mhm.
Judaism. That's actually there's magic there.
Yeah,
Catholicism, I mean, what do you do when a funeral passes?
yeah,
Right? I just crossed myself for anybody that can't
yeah,
see because I know that as soon as, there's a funeral or something, you're going to bless your soul and keep everything in place, right?
right.
When somebody sneezes, okay, why do you say bless you when somebody sneezes? Because there was a belief that when you sneeze, your soul leaves your body and you have to bless it so it can go back
Mhm.
again. It's like, what is this? You could label it superstition or you could label it spells. Depends
Yeah,
on whether you believe there's anything to it or not. But if you don't believe there's anything to it, then I would ask, why do you keep doing it? Because I'll bet you do.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, eh? Like, and like I had said before, right? When I was in, I think it was age doesn't matter, but the fact that, I was in a race and everyone wanted this one person to win, so everyone was trying to send energy to that person. And I was like, hey, I can grab that. And I took the energy, even though the intention was to get it to that one person, their inability to harness their intention properly was to the detriment of the effect they were trying to achieve. And I was able to take the effect for myself because I had a better understanding of how to use energy. And
And that
that's,
that
yeah,
actually is a perfect example of why not to try and
yeah,
affect things like elections and what have you, because that could blow up quite spectacularly. And even love spells, we've talked about those
hmm
before. There are no rules in witchcraft. That said, there is common sense, and
hmm
there is a knowing that you don't mess with somebody else's free will. If you
right,
wouldn't want it to happen to you, and this is in any religion you care to look at, if you don't want it to happen to you, don't do it to somebody else. And that, I would say, also applies in witchcraft, particularly when you're using your intention to alter the outcome of something, whether that's a
right,
love spell or something bigger like a war outcome, that kind of thing. That's if you change the path of something, then you are changing everything in its path.
hmm
And is that something you can handle? Is that something other people ought to have to handle? There's a whole
yes,
thing. And thinking of a very physical manifestation of that right now, look at North Carolina in the US, and the storms that went through were a geographic event. Like it was
hmm
massive. It's like Pompeii. This has been a very big event and it has wiped out more people than we know.
hmm
And entire rivers have moved. They are no longer on the path they were on. They are now several feet in a different direction and they are moving differently. So all of that outcome changed, and everything in the path of that river has been affected. There's wholesale
hmm
destruction, yes, but there's just massive changes that will stay that way. Now, that's a physical manifestation of a weather event, and it shouldn't be so massive, right? And yet it is. So think of that in terms of your intention and your practice moving a path, moving an event, the course of events, if you will. You're
hmm
taking that and changing its direction the way the rivers have been changed in North Carolina, and you're responsible for everything in that path.
yeah,
Ooh, that's a big one. You
hmm
really want to you really want to go there, dear listener, please don't.
yeah,
It's a lot to take on, and you will be dealing with it for lifetimes.
yeah. It's funny because, like, my example, right? I was like 12, 11 or 12. I had no formal training. I just had a sense of the flow and an idea that it could be done. And I changed the outcome of what basically almost the full stand of people were trying to accomplish. So one person versus many. And that's with just basically a neophyte's understanding of how to do this.
Mhm.
So you can imagine that as you're putting your energy out there to get certain outcomes, like me as an adult now, what I could accomplish doing that same thing with the understanding of the flow of things, understanding where flows can, understanding outcomes, understanding how to even take more energy than was offered because I know how to exploit weaknesses. I know how to get into places and people that they don't even know they have. So if, like I said, if I can do it as a kid who barely understands and now do it as an adult who has a very good understanding and a good command of my capacities, and that's me, one person. Now imagine, like, I'm not the only person in the world who can do this, you know?
Exactly.
So it's actually something to think about when you do these things, when you wish for an outcome or when you pour your energy into something, because, it's up for grabs by people with superior skills.
It is, and also maybe they have superior numbers,
Yes.
and numbers can matter. If there's a
Oh
few of
yeah.
you pulling in one direction and a whole load of people pulling in another, that can end up with you falling flat on your face, right? And really not in a good way. So it again, it's my what's coming up for me really is the intent to have the listener think before they dive into something and think about it globally, like long
Right.
term, what are you doing? The race that you were talking about, that
Hmm.
was an event that was going to affect the people running, and that was it, and nobody
Hmm.
was going to be harmed. This was a pretty straightforward outcome. Now, if you had taken the intent of, I want to win and that person needs to break their leg,
That's right.
then that would have been a very different scenario. Now you're affecting a bunch of people and you're
Hmm.
shifting trajectories and all kinds of things. But what you did with the innocence of a child is you took it to a straightforward conclusion because you could, and it didn't go deeper. And that's,
Yeah.
I don't believe that that is problematic. There's no reason for it to be problematic. But when you're trying to alter bigger things to see if you can, or
Hmm.
because you believe you can, dear listener, um, then I'm going to say that's not a good reason to stick your fingers in an unknown pie. And I
That's right.
don't think I would do that.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny because it makes me think of, how, especially now, right, there's a lot of rallies going on. Well, now is voting, but leading up to the election. Like, but that's what you're doing. You're generating up as much energy as you can. And so you can direct it. Like, so you have the quote unquote mundane thing of getting everyone on board and getting them to go out and vote. But if you have someone in any of their entourages who know how to use energy, then there's even more they can do with that. Not just get people to go out and vote and not just get people to go out and do what you tell them because, there's that part of it. But there's now you have access to all this energy
Hmm.
that you can make use of. It's funny because this is probably, this is gonna be one of those times where we do really get into the esoteric part of what we're talking about. And this, where we start pushing people's boundaries of what they accept, right? But we've long since been past the point of worrying about credibility at this stage. So when you blindly jump into, or not even blindly, like when you jump into and you don't realize what you're giving out to,
Hmm.
like cults work the way they work to bypass your defenses and use your weaknesses. And this, be it political, be it religious, be it a sports team or whatever, you're doing it, you're giving up energy. And not everyone involved necessarily knows consciously what they're doing, but they can understand intuitively or they can have an intuitive use of your energy, which helps them grow the cult even more and helps them accomplish more things than they could before. And yeah,
It's a whole thing that we're currently facing on so many fronts.
yeah,
Politically, yes, absolutely. There's a whole thing. Um, I tend to bring up anti-Semitism because
mm,
not many people are, but that is a whole bandwagon. I see
yeah,
people making comments like Israel will be gone soon and you're all going to die and stuff like this. And it's just, who are these people saying these things? And would you have said that 2 years ago or, 18 months ago? Where does this strength of negative emotion come from? And a lot of it comes from, jumping on the bandwagon. Sure,
right.
you're one of the popular kids, right? And you're saying all the things that popular people yell, and you're not under attack right now.
Mm-hmm,
If somebody walks down the street wearing a Magen David or
mm-hmm,
Star of David, they could be attacked for that.
mm-hmm.
But you can wear a keffiyeh, which symbolizes that you're pro-Palestine, and nobody's going to attack you. This is evident everywhere we look. So people are drawn to the safer one of the two, which espouses a lot of hatred. And it takes on almost a physical form of its own. Like there are
Yeah.
dark shapes there when you look in those groups, you can see it. I can see it anyway. It's like there's an amorphous blob, and
Mhm.
it's very, very dark, and it's pervading everybody there, and feeding off that energy, and
Yes.
then feeding back to them more of the negative. And so what you have is something that's escalating beyond anything you could have imagined, and yet here it is. And when those people are no longer affected by this black
Hmm.
amorphous mob, when it's no longer there, they're going to be left wondering, I hope, they're going to be left
Yeah.
wondering, what was that? What happened? Why, how did I end up wanting people I've never met before to be hurt and killed? Like,
Well,
where did that come from? That's somebody tapping into a whole lot of dark
hmm
energy there and using it willfully and very well, in that they're very accurate with what they're trying to do.
well, I was going to go down that road, not necessarily with that example, but yes, but you brought up the example that works. So I was going to say, because not only are you giving up energy, but because you're doing it and you're being compliant, you're also making the reverse flow possible. You're completing a circuit in this case, not just giving out your energy, but you're also completing a circuit. So what you feed out can then be transformed and sent back to you to manipulate you.
Hmm.
There's not just the psychological manipulation, there's also the energy manipulation that happens. That's actually a very big
Absolutely.
one. You see it with a lot of charismatic people. I was gonna, we had earlier on another episode talked a little bit about charisma, but I was saying there's that flow. Like people who can work with flow tend to come across as more charismatic. And it's that very reason is that you complete a circuit and they can feed you the energy. And that energy can feel really good. Like someone who's well intentioned and, can do the flow, then you can feel loved, you can feel the compassion, and that'll bring you in even more. But people who don't necessarily can do compassion can do fear.
And sometimes they
Yeah.
can masquerade for a while too.
Yes.
Like they might not have the compassion, but they can
Mm.
project it. And so
Yes.
you think that's what you're looking at, but it's not what it seems. That's not
Hmm.
what you're looking at. And, cults, those are always full of people who are desperate to belong. And that's, I think, what we're seeing on the world stage at the moment too, is a group of
Hmm.
people who are desperate to belong. And I've said before on this podcast that, during the COVID pandemic, we had a lot of people who were disillusioned, disenfranchised, just life as they thought they knew it went away,
Yeah.
and something else was in its place. The purpose that they thought they had for a lot of people was shattered. It just didn't matter anymore, or it went away because of the
Yeah.
new structure of things. And so those people are looking for something to plug in to that purpose space. And depending on their age and stage and mental faculties to some degree,
Hmm.
as to what they're influenced by.
Yes.
But boy, the timing is just perfect storm for the whole thing. It's fascinating and awful to watch all at the same time. A bit like
Yeah.
watching a tornado, right? You see a tornado coming through,
Hmm.
and but you feel like you're in a safe spot, so you can watch this thing, and it's just trashing the place, like it's destroying the place.
Hmm.
And as you're watching it, it's like, what awesome power, and how incredible this whole structure of energy is, this tornado. But doesn't mean you like it. It just means you can see it, and
Right.
you're awed by it. Meanwhile, there's massive destruction happening. And being able to see it but not be in it is a very, ooh, I don't even know how to phrase that one, but it's a difficult space to be in. At the same time, you could say that you are being honored in some way, because you're getting to see something
Yeah.
that
Hmm.
people aren't seeing. Now, it's kind of a dubious honor, but
Yes.
it's something that you are being gifted with. And the question, which is a hard one to answer, I think, is what do you do with that now you've got it? What do you do with
Yeah.
that gift? And that's I don't have answers for that one right now.
But that is
Uh,
part of the point of this episode. Or it is, I don't, that I didn't mention at the beginning of this episode, but I had done, I had drawn some cards because the topic was what do we who are senior in this practice, what do we teach the younger ones? And we, from a spiritual perspective, are viewing the tornado from the outside, from a distance. We're not
mhm.
physically at a distance, but we are spiritually at a distance, and we can see the tornado. And one of the advantages, right, is seeing the escape routes. It's kind of having an idea of where the tornado might go because you can see the lay of the land and you can see the forces at play that'll direct the tornado. And so I know what part of it is we can say, hey, look this way, there's your escape route, or look at this. You can predict where this is going to go by looking at these signs. So, it's hand down what we know and hand out that understanding of how to be safe even when you're in a tornado to the best you can be safe in a tornado.
How to navigate.
Yeah.
I think I do believe that the current purpose or the theme. No, I like that word better. The theme of life
Mm-hmm.
right now is navigation.
Yeah.
How are you, each person, every person that's listening, every person that isn't listening, how are you navigating the pitfalls that are out there? Because there are so many. It's a question of navigating you. It's not a question of blame. There's
Right.
no point. It's we're too far for blame to
Mm-hmm.
be of any use whatsoever. I don't honestly think it ever was useful, but it has less than no use now. It's a distraction. Blame, shame, these things are a distraction. The question is, when you can see the tornado, how are you
Mm-hmm.
going to navigate the tornado? And did you see the one that was behind it?
Mm-hmm.
Because that needs navigating too.
Yep.
And you don't get to say, I'm tired, I can't do this, or I don't feel like it. We're not in that era. This is not life on this planet right now.
No.
We've been there historically. We've been there. We are not there now.
2025 is the year to get that stuff in order, or at
Yeah,
least start getting
if
it
you
in
could
order.
start now, that'd be really good.
Yeah.
If you could
Yeah.
start
Because
10
once
years
again,
ago,
right, we're
even
still in
better.
2024,
Yeah.
but because we record ahead. But yes, 2025 is you should, like, when you said to people who were listening and not listening, I would add to people who don't realize they're listening. We had an
Yeah.
episode like that
Hmm.
where I kind of,
And
this is where we first blew our credibility to be in early on when I said there's somebody listening right now. I spoke to that person who it was, and they hadn't listened, but they had listened while we
right.
were recording. So,
Yeah, 2025 is going to be the year where people realize that things really aren't what they seem and that
mm,
um there's so much recalibrating that you need to do
yeah,
because of that change in perception, that change in understanding. The tornado went through and it ripped everything up and it shifted things, it moved them around, it dropped them back in different places. It
yeah,
does not look the way it did. And you have to decide, are you working to, I wouldn't say repair, more rebuild in a different
mm,
way, or are you gonna like sit at the side of the road and be sad for yourself because your outcome will come from your choices. Um, and there's different shades of gray on this, right? It's not all
yeah,
you're either this or that. That's a very zero sum game way of thinking, and that's not how the world works.
no,
But what you decide in 2025, what you're going to go into, where you're going to direct your energy is going to affect a lot of things.
yeah, yeah. So, like I said, when this episode comes out, it'll be after January 20th. So, whoever won will be taking their position. This will be, so you'll have a taste of what the 2025 is already about. by the time this episode comes out. So then the point is now you've seen what happens, you've seen this major event, and you're gonna have some tools. But we're gonna give you a little bit of hope. We're gonna give you a little bit of a way to go. As I am often fond of telling people who want to get out of a bad situation, I tell them, don't run from a situation, don't run from something, run to something. Like if you have no choice, obviously run from something, right? Immediate danger and everything. But it is better to have an escape plan than it is to run blindly. Because people who run blindly can be herded into a new situation. But
Mm,
people who have a direction can don't get herded as well because they know where they want to be.
that's so true. I like that. Yeah.
Well, that's the thing because people in the past used to say, "Oh, so I just want to get out." I'm like, okay, you leave this one situation, but you're going to end up in another situation just like it because somebody else will just herd you into that new situation because they'll see you're vulnerable. They'll see you don't know what to do. And it's like, oh, now you're my mark when you were that person's mark before, but now you're mine.
Hmm.
So you want an idea of where you're going to and what you're trying to achieve so that you can avoid being basically victimized again or pulled into something you don't want to be pulled into.
And I would say also take time to pause, which I know is counterintuitive, but hang on for a second.
Yeah.
Take time to pause and look at the situation, look at the debris left by the tornado, and figure out what was the lesson here? Where is the gold that you can mine from it? Because there's always something. It's a question of stopping long enough to look at it and find it and accept that it's there. Because here's the deal: if you don't, it will happen again and again. It's like Groundhog Day, it's going to keep
Mm,
on going until you get the message. That's why some people's lives are very much, why does this always happen to me? As soon as you hear that,
mm-hmm,
that whole language there, why does this always happen to me? It's a sort of willful blindness, if you will, is the why. Always happen to me
mm-hmm,
means you're not taking responsibility and you're stuck in a cycle because you're not getting the point. You're not getting the message. So slow down for a sec while you're figuring out your escape route. And
yeah,
also, what can you learn so that you don't have to repeat it? Because it will be repeated until it's learned. That's just, I don't know. I don't even know what to call it a law of, but it is. It always happens that way.
yeah. Until you've learned your lesson, you're going to keep being taught your lesson over and over and over. It's the way, and I mean, and when you think about it, it makes sense. If you haven't learned it, then you have to be taught again until you learn it.
And we are here to learn things
Hmm.
because, if you consider that you're not, then I would love to know, what do you think you are here for?
Hmm.
What's the point? And if there is no point, then why are you still here? And that's,
Yeah,
that's one of those questions that, shock horror, what did she just suggest? But no, I'm asking a real question. If you don't think that you're here to learn anything, then what are you here for? And if there's no point to that, then the pretty logical question is, well, what's keeping you? Why are you still
yeah.
here? Of
Well,
course, there's a purpose. Of
I
course,
was
there's
going
a
to
point.
say, even for people who are gamers, because I like using this video game analogy. Like if you look, because we talk about, well, why manifest here, but you don't get famous. You just, whatever, you're in your local area, you don't seem to gain any notoriety. But when you play a video game, you might play for 5, 10 minutes because you got a few minutes free, or you might play for 20 minutes or an hour or whatever. But you're doing it because you want to. You're doing it because you're getting something out of it. You're not doing it for accolades. You're not doing it. You're literally doing it for yourself. And that's what this life is. It's for yourself, for you to get things out of however you want to term what you're getting out of it. I know, to give a weird example, or not so weird of an example, but like, so basically, as human beings, right, we all generally have twins. I think that's what I've heard, but only one really makes it. I don't know if that's true or
Okay.
not. But whether that's true or not, to give the example of sometimes people are twins, but one of the twins doesn't make it. And I've heard people talk about it being that, well, that twin that didn't make it was just there to help the other twin on their journey of getting into this life. And then the twin has done their job and they go back.
Hmm.
So their manifestation
Interesting.
to the
I
world
haven't
was just
heard
to help
that.
the other one come in.
I haven't heard that before. That's
No.
interesting. But there's many ways of looking at a thing. It's
Yeah.
just I think that's part of what we're here for as well, is just learning perspectives, learning the lessons, learning all the things. Whatever comes your way, what's the point to that? Because once you learn something, you can then share that with other people who need
Right.
it. So, that's basically why we're social animals. Human beings are very social animals. We might not like people sometimes,
Right.
but everybody loves individuals. Like there are
Yes.
individuals that you love. That just is. Even if you're antisocial on a larger
Yeah.
scale. And
Yeah.
being antisocial on a larger scale is indicative of an unhealthy environment. So that's why the incongruity there. But I know plenty of people actually who would identify as I don't like people, but
Yeah.
I have individuals. And that's so with those individuals, those are the people that you can help, you can affect, you can pass your lessons to if they're ready to receive them in whatever way they're ready to receive them, right?
Yeah.
But we're social beings. We have to have contact with others. That's just what we do.
Well, that's very true, right? And as a social species, right, we complement each other. What one person lacks in a skill or a capacity in one way, another person has that capacity, which actually brings me to the thing of we fail to understand that so much, I think.
Oh, all the time. And an area that I'd love to point out right this second for that
Mm.
is autism. You look at somebody with an autistic brain, and
Hmm.
unless they have other things going on that get in the way, if you will, that person's brain is wired differently and fabulously because they will see things from a completely different perspective to other people, and they will pay attention to detail that others miss. They basically make up the shortfall of everybody else.
Right.
And this is perceived as a problem for some reason. We have difficulty with it. And yet, where's the genius come from? 9 times out of 10, you can point to somebody with an autistic brain.
Mm.
It's simply a different way of wiring, but boy, it can be magnificent. You have superpowers with this kind of brain, and people who don't think that way are afraid and will
Yeah.
put it down. They will like, no, 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 that's not a good thing. You need to be like me. Well,
Right.
if everybody if everybody goes for that lowest common denominator, and yeah, I'm going to use that term, then we stay stuck with our square wheels and still trying to figure out how to make fire. Like you have to have differences coming in. That's how the human race grows and hopefully improves. And the autistic brain is a perfect example of where we are missing the point. We're missing something hugely here. Now, I am
Yeah.
talking about somebody who's functioning well in life, that, they don't have other issues that
Right.
get in the way. So to make that clear, because I hear people arguing all the time, well, what if you've got somebody that, and then they put a bunch of
Yeah.
things in there. I'm talking about an autistic brain. And one of
Hmm.
I think the most brilliant person I've ever met was nonverbal until he was 11. And he very clearly has an autistic brain.
Hmm.
Absolutely no question. And I am regularly staggered by this guy's brilliance. Like he's absolutely a genius in every possibility of the word. And it just blows my mind. And yet he has this experience of being nonverbal till he was 11. So he was treated like an idiot.
Yeah.
And he's so far from idiot, think Stephen Hawking and then put him on steroids because this
Mm,
guy is that smart. Like he's incredible.
yeah. Well, it's funny, right? Because when you were talking, it made me think of, and it does tie into politics, but leaders. Like I always prefer to use the term central coordinator,
Okay.
but because you have these differences, right? And some people can be night and day to each other on the extremes, that you need someone who can smooth out the rough patches and someone who can help coordinate the things, even with these diversity of ideas and thoughts and perceptions or perspectives on situations. Because it's the classic thing, right? There's a joke about it going, God sitting there planning and saying, "Hey, I'm gonna make half the people wake up in the morning, and I'm gonna have half the people stay up late at night." So there's always someone looking out for each other. So you're always looking out for each other. And then the following panel is all the people who get up early, accusing all the people who stay up late of being lazy and saying they should also get up early in the morning, right? And then God doing the face palm kind of a thing,
Yeah, you know what? I like that. I think that's a very good illustration of what we're doing as a species. It's like
right?
the things that are most helpful are the things we target first to
Right.
to try and get rid of or give a hard time to or somehow change, right?
Yeah.
Because working with kids with autism, I have long been yelling at anybody that cares to listen. Look, these kids are not wallpaper, they are not chameleons, they do not need to fit in.
Mm.
There is simply a belonging, a need
Yeah.
to be accepted as they are, and let's do that. But there's been this perception of let's make everybody fit in. And we see this in so many areas, right? Like you can be one of the things right now on social media is people talking about authenticity. You need to be
Right.
authentic. Authenticity is the way to go. And it absolutely is until you disagree with something they're saying. And
Yeah.
then you're wrong. So you're either authentic, which means you fit in, or
Hmm.
you disagree and therefore you're wrong. And isn't that an interesting breakdown of what should be a pretty decent concept? No, it isn't.
Right.
Authenticity is a buzzword for you need to be in with the in crowd.
Well, yeah, that's the thing, right? Because I was going to word that in a different way, but it's not happening. But what was I going to say? So people will notice if you're paying attention, be it science, be it the spiritual, mystical stuff, wherever you sit on that spectrum, we've agreed upon at this point, which actually seems to be fairly common in this field or this
Mhm.
endeavor, is that there's a spectrum but it's still all people looking for knowledge. But the people who usually excel in this are the people who stand out, and not the ones who are conforming. And I don't want to use that word because it's loaded and has a certain view. But the people who stand outside, and have that outside view are the ones who excel in this because they have the outside view,
It's an
because they
uncomfortable
see
place
the
to be.
inside, what's going on, and they have the outside perspective of it. So again, like with the storm, right? With the tornado, you can see the escape routes. You can see where if someone goes there, they're going to be in danger. So the people who stand outside tend to excel in sciences and in the mystical practices because you're seeing it from the outside. You're not trying to conform. You're not trying to make things happen. You just have a perspective on the outside that lets you see what the probabilities are.
And I would say anywhere on the spectrum, something
Hmm.
that this particular spectrum from science to
Yeah.
spirituality and back again, the common factor is questions.
Yes.
Always asking questions and always looking for an unknown answer as opposed to confirmation of what you already believe, which is a very different and differentiating approach because so often people are looking for confirmation of what they already believe so that they can be comfortable. Because right now, this is not a very comfortable planet. So let's just look for some
Yes.
ways that we don't have to be challenged. Thanks. And having to alter your worldview on something, for example, is a lot of work.
Mm.
or it's perceived as a lot of work. It isn't actually that hard, but you have to accept something that means you've got to accept that you need to change your viewpoint. And not everybody's okay with that because they think it means something about them and they've mistaken their viewpoint for being their value or their worth, and it gets a whole sticky mess. It gets very complicated because they're the wrong ingredients. It's incorrect. Your
Mm.
viewpoint is something that you can and should change with new information and change it as often as it needs changing. It's like socks, man. You don't have to keep wearing them for a certain amount of time.
Yeah.
You can change them. And that's a really good idea. That's how we grow. And for some reason, we have been stuck as a species in this place of not wanting to do that in the last generational few. Um,
Yeah.
the energy's getting stuck and it
Yeah.
will release. It will break free from this
You
place of
know,
stuckness. So,
your socks analogy is very, very well, is very good, and it's a very good segue because, like, it's one of the things you'll find as an adult, right? Is you struggle to do things. You might find yourself following the routine your parents set for you, or you might find yourself following set rules like change your clothes. You change your clothes once a day or whatever it is. Like you put on your socks in the morning, take them off at night. And you move on, and then whatever happens, be damned. But and this is an easy example, right? Because the first thing you discover is, well, what if I step in water, like a puddle, or my shoes get soaked, or well, then it's like,
mhm.
oh, okay, well, then you can break from the norm and you can take those socks off. But there's so many other things. Like I think about it, like because my own weakness is the constant cleaning and maintenance of a home is that's the part that gets me. But it's like, so my brain kind of goes to just clean it when it's dirty. Like when it gets dirty, clean it. And then there are things you have to do larger maintenance because you don't deal with them all the time. Like once a year, you should probably wash your walls because of all your breathing and your sweating and stuff. Eventually accumulates, but it's the knowing that these are just guidelines and you don't have to stick with them. If you have an urgent reason to do them now instead of you're scheduled once a week or once a month or whatever it is, just do it in this new time. Like don't worry about what your schedule is. And I say part of that too is there was a reason for me bringing this up. And it had something to do with being kind when kindness is needed. So this is kind of a roundabout way to go to it.
Well, sometimes kindness doesn't look how you think it's going to look either.
No,
It takes different forms, and sometimes, a kick up the ass is actually the kindest thing you can do.
yes.
Putting it bluntly, but yeah, sometimes that is required. If somebody's stuck and they really can't see a way out, and you show them and you show them and they can't see it, then the only thing left is a put up the ass,
Hmm.
or you could leave them stuck,
Yeah. I
which
was
is
actually going to bring
kindest.
this, I was going to bring this back to what I said earlier about I find when I work with women that have more powerful magical connections, it's because when I work with guys, a kick in the ass usually works. I don't need to go deep and have a strong mystical connection. It's just that you need to do this. No, kick in the ass. Okay, I'll do it. All right, problem solved.
Interesting. Okay.
So you don't need the same bonding level. You don't need the same connection. It happens though. I have had Uh, I did do actually work where I did actually have a male where I did have that kind of level of connection. It was actually pretty hilarious.
Hmm. I can imagine.
Yeah. The example I'll give, and God forbid one day he ever hears this episode, that I was visiting with him and we were going to go out for supper. And I ended up changing my mind like 10 times of where to go.
Uh-huh.
And at the end of it, on the 10th time, I'm like, listen, man, I'm sorry, but I just keep getting this compulsion to change my mind. And he looks at me and he goes, that's fine because that's exactly what I was doing. He says every time I saw a new place, I wanted to go there instead of the place we had planned to go to. But you just happened to mention it after I thought it.
Hmm. Interesting. I wonder what the point to that was.
Yeah, it is. because at that point I wasn't really working for him invisibly anymore. It was more of an end of an era. We were just kind of hanging out, and that was kind of it was coming to an end kind of a thing. But it was, yeah, like, but when
Well,
I was
maybe
like
it
deep in
was
my invisible work with him, it was a lot like that.
maybe it
Where,
was representative of the number of pathways that were available and the possibility that you could change your mind from one to the other.
hmm
Maybe it was opening possibility doors.
yeah, well, that's the thing. He ended up
Maybe
going into
not.
business for himself after, and all kinds of things like that. But yeah, it was interesting. He's the only male that where I really had that kind of actual constant supernatural intervention, basically.
Hmm.
And it was usually in the terms of, well, actually, he's I mentioned it in first season. He's the guy where we were sitting and we were moving the fog back.
Hmm.
So
Okay.
me and him actually had a lot of supernatural occurrences.
Interesting.
But generally for women, it's usually like that. Usually I'll have like an idea of what they're up to that day, or I could pretty much call them anytime and say, "Hey, right now you're doing this," and they're kind of like, "Well, yeah, actually, kind of, yeah." Right? How do you know? Don't worry about it. I just know.
Hmm. Well, yeah. No, the connection is interesting, and I
Mm,
think more and more people have that available to them if they are willing to look at it, willing to try. I have
yeah,
connection with a few people that and they are as far from me on the planet as you could get. One's in New Zealand and one's in Lithuania.
right.
Um, and here I am in the US. So we've got different time zones and everything going on in a big way, different day even when it comes to New Zealand. And yet, as soon as we connect, there's an instant, oh, why are you feeling this way? What's going on? And it's like there's no need to ask, do you feel this way or how do you feel? It's just
Mm,
straight into, oh, where's that coming from? And it goes each way. Like it's a free flow kind of thing, which is it's very cool, and I'm also very accustomed to it. It's been
yeah,
quite some time, particularly the one in New Zealand. We've been in different countries together at different times, and
right.
we can sort of not have contact for a year and more, and just pick up where we left off the very next time. Or we can be in contact a lot, and it doesn't matter. It's actually not important.
hmm
Um, it doesn't alter the connection or the friendship in any way. It just is. It transcends all the usual perceived limitations, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
It's very
I was
cool.
going to say, you know, for people in our position, and I know for me specifically, sometimes I have this level of connection with people who don't realize there's this level of connection, but I'm aware of it.
Mm,
And this is where it's one of those things where I have trepidations of talking about things because it's like that I know the vibe, I know what I'm picking up, and I know what the connection is, but I know you don't know the connection. So it's like, should I bother telling you or not tell you?
mm, interesting. Yeah, don't know. I guess that would be a case by case basis.
Well, that's the thing, right? Like it's part of my practice or part of my task, if you will. It's the Let's put it like this: when I get assigned to someone, or as I used to like to say, activated for someone, whether or not they were consciously aware they needed it or not, I still had the bond, I still had the connection, I still had the understanding, I still knew things about them that they may not have wanted me to know, or that not that they wanted me to know consciously, so to speak,
Mhm.
right? Because I'm activated for a reason. They need the help, they want the help because that's part of it. It's well, it's like this, right? It's be careful what you wish for because you might get your wish granted. And so someone might find themselves, people usually who I'm assigned to, or yeah, assigned to work with, it's they needed help with something. Well, I'm the answer to that. You wanted help. Now, I may not be the person you want to help you, but I'm still
Mm,
that person. And so I have the prerequisite. So because this is a supernatural intervention, then I also have the supernatural understanding of the situation. And so I had to learn how to be clever and not just necessarily, unless the situation warranted it, to not just blurt out what needed to be said, unless it needed
Yes.
to be said in a blurted out way.
I believe that's if I remember rightly, that's in your human design as well,
Yeah.
is you need to um, focus on timing of what you're saying to
Hmm.
somebody and how you deliver it so they can receive it. Both of
Yeah.
those things need to be in place. Um, I love the interconnectedness of all these things. I'm currently studying neuroscience in a
Hmm.
pretty big way. I am having the best time. I love this stuff. I'm
Yeah.
totally here for it because what I'm learning is it's not just the, hey, here are the brain structures and this
Hmm.
is what the parts do. Sure, there's some of that, but most of it is this part is activated in this way and it looks like that, and this is what you do about it if you want to change that pattern or you want to change that thing. And as I'm making my notes on the
Hmm.
subject, I'm also making notes on, so in human design, this
Yeah.
piece is here, this piece is here, and this piece is here. And the structures of the brain and how they work
Hmm.
all relate beautifully to human design. Like I can totally see there's different systems in the brain. Some are imaginatively named, such as System 1 and System 2. But anyway, the point is there's stuff going on in neuroscience that absolutely is reflected in human design, which is absolutely reflected in behavior science, which is, and you can go all the way through and then
Right.
start. I like to start with that structure and then look at, okay, so spiritually, what does that look like? Or when you're bringing spells into it, what does that look like?
Yes.
And there's so many layers. It's just the coolest thing. It's
Yes.
it's like a matrix, quite literally, but not the kind everybody complains
Yeah.
about. It's just there's so much complexity there, and it all fits perfectly. It's so cool,
Yes. That's the yes.
right?
It's sometimes some people ask me, how come you're smiling or why are you laughing? And it's like, because I see the connection. I see how it all mixes in the matrix. And it's humorous because I'm watching you try to do something and I see you're missing this component, this component, this component, but I can't tell it to you because you have no idea how the matrix works. So you can't know so you can't even use the information I'm going to give you. So
Hmm. Yeah.
without me, taking the time, I would have to take time to teach them how to use it. But I'll be honest with you, sometimes this is part of, I can't speak on behalf of witches and all wizards everywhere, but it's part of the fun sometimes to watch people struggle through and seeing what they're missing out on because they refuse to accept certain things.
Yeah. I don't know if fun is the word I'd use for
Yeah.
that, but it's certainly part of the deal.
Yes.
It's what you get to see, and depending on how you feel about that as to
Mm-hmm.
what it can do, because it can be hella frustrating sometimes. I have this thing where I can see what's coming. I know
Right.
it's coming, and I can articulate it. The problem is people don't hear me when I do it. They're not listening, or they can't accept. And I've been doing this since I was a kid. And
Right.
it's like, but it's so plain and obvious and clear to me that when I say
Right.
it, and people say, no, 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 that's not right. That's not possible. It can't be this, it can't be that, and da da da. And I get like shoved off to the side because
Mm-hmm.
what I'm saying can't be accurate. And then blow me down. It all falls out exactly how I just said it was going to. And sometimes people will remember and kind of give me a second look, like, didn't you say that? But usually they forget I ever said anything. And it used to drive me nuts. Like it used to bother me so much for years. I felt like I was yelling into the void and nobody was listening. And
Yeah.
now I've developed to the point where I know I'm yelling into the void.
Yeah.
And it's just I don't have an attachment to people listening, or I try
Yeah.
very hard not to have that attachment because um they typically don't hear what I'm saying. It's
Yeah.
weird. It's
Hmm.
like being the you know the oracle. It's a Cassandra type deal where you
Yeah.
just like, okay, you're asking the thing, I'm gonna tell you the thing, and you're not gonna hear what I'm telling you.
Yeah.
But we'll play the game.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, it is funny when someone else notices it, when a third party notices what's happening, even though they don't understand it. I've had that happen to me before. I think I was in school, like in college, and we were doing something. We're all sitting around a table, and someone looked at me, and I said, "What?" They go, "You're doing something," and I'm like, "What are
Aha.
you talking about?" Like, there's something. I'm like,
Aha.
"Yeah." I say, "Well, I'm glad you noticed, but
But I'm not gonna tell you what it
yeah,
is. Yeah.
I'll leave you to investigate further to what you think it is."
Yeah. And the thing is, the ability to see things as are going to
Mm,
manifest, they're coming. It's not an attribute that needs to be rare or anything.
yep.
It really doesn't. You just need to accept it. Like, stay still long enough to see it's there. I'm not seeing anything that's not there. I'm not seeing anything that's unique, or at least there's no reason for it to be unique.
Yeah.
It's there. It's like, come on, people, could we all look over here? And it's like, I don't know. So
Well,
often they don't. Every
I
now
was
and
gonna
then
say
somebody will.
I was gonna say you can probably find people. You can probably sit down with a bunch of people, and I bet you everyone can give you an example where they've had their precognitive moment where they knew something was coming.
Really, they should,
Yeah.
because it's just a case of being in touch with,
Mm,
even in the neuroscience, right? Like, there is
right.
an explanation for this. The place I'm learning from right now, the guy was saying, your intuition
Hmm.
comes from your subconscious. And then he's
Right.
explaining it in neuroscience terms, which I found very interesting. And I'm going to look into that more, because I'm not fully convinced of his version yet, but I can see where he's coming from. So I want to kind of dive into that a little more and see what the connections are. But there's no reason for people not to have that.
Yeah.
And some just see it more often than others because they're
Hmm.
willing to, I would say.
Yeah.
A lot of it is what you're willing to accept from around you, and what is it
Hmm.
you're willing to ignore. As kids, we're taught to ignore our intuition, typically speaking,
Right.
because intuition is unseen and it doesn't come from a parent telling you a thing or a teacher
Right.
telling you. So your behavior from there is likely to be something they couldn't predict because it's in response to your intuition. This is not helpful when you're a teacher or a parent. You need the kid to behave in a way that you can predict. So you
Right.
can keep them safe, and so you can feel like you're doing your job right and all those things. So when a kid shows signs of responding to something unseen, such as their intuition,
Right.
the natural, unfortunately, the natural response is to squash that. Use your head,
Yeah.
think about it. Where's your common sense, etc. Did
Yeah.
you use your brain when you decided that? And so on and so forth. And all of that speaks to, let's ignore intuition and we'll go with learned patterns so that we can predict what you're going to do next.
Yeah.
It's a safety thing when you're a kid, but it gets in the way when you're older.
Hmm. Yeah. What I was going to use as an example was there's probably most people, if you ask them and they really think about it, they can guess one situation where they've averted a problem because they had a gut feeling not to do it.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Several instances, I would think. I
Yeah.
mean, when I'm doing human design with somebody and
Mhm.
they tell me they don't have any intuition, it's very easy to get them to tap into it by using the negative example. So, for example, if I said to you, okay, picture this. You're in the center of New York and you're walking down the street and there's an alleyway and you think you saw something moving at the other end of the alleyway. It's 3 o'clock in the morning, by the way. So you decide you were going to walk down the alleyway and investigate what was at the other end.
Right.
What's your body telling you right now? And typically speaking, it's like, whoa, no. Okay. Can you think of a time when you felt that way before? And people always have examples of when they just knew they shouldn't do that thing,
Yeah.
but they did it, and damn it, they knew they shouldn't do it. There you go. There's your intuition. That's the
Yeah.
negative voice of your intuition, which is the one you're going to hear most often because it's here to keep you safe.
Yes.
And then the
That's what I was gonna
yes.
say. Yeah.
The yes is a little more difficult to access, but once you've got your negative and you feel that and you understand that and you recognize it, then the rest becomes easier.
Yes.
So it's everybody has it and they've experienced it. They haven't necessarily trusted it.
Yeah. That's that's pretty much it. Like it's so true to reiterate, right? We try to get rid of that in children. And as I always like to play devil's advocate on things, but there's probably been people who've made mistakes, but were they mistakes? As I always like to tell people, right? There's I use the term omens, but you could insert whatever, signs of things. Like, and I use this example. I might find a new one at some point, but I like this one so far. If I go around this corner, I'm going to be bitten by a dog. And then a greater omen comes out and says, yeah, but you need to be bitten by the dog.
Mm,
So your first instinct is that, well, my sense is to say that if I go around the corner and be bitten by the dog, therefore I must go the other way. But then there's the greater thing of the, no, no, you're going that way. You're going back to the other way.
that's actually two things at play
Yeah.
because your intuition is only going to give you one
Mm-hmm.
response, and that's going to be the don't go there.
Right.
There's something's going to bite you.
Mm-hmm.
That's not good. Something else that's a different layer of knowing that you
Yes.
have that kicks in and says, yeah, but you need to go there. That's a very different thing. The intuition is a sort of one-time voice,
Mm-hmm.
doesn't give a second opinion, and it's literally there to keep you safe.
Yes.
It's there for survival. Straight up, that's it. And it's just a one-shot deal. So it's interesting that you have that second
Mm-hmm.
experience coming in, and that would be really interesting to kind of explore because it's not intuition, but it's something that clearly can override it. And
Yeah.
that's interesting because intuition is there to keep you safe. So what is this thing that's putting you in a different position? That's really interesting. I'm going to see if that comes up
Yeah.
in neuroscience as well.
Yeah. Well, I'll share this with you, and I may have shared this. I don't know if off episode, but so 2013 for me, for lack of better expression, I was veiled, as in I couldn't see anything. Like I had a good immediate sense of my immediate vicinity, but if I tried to expand beyond my immediate vicinity, both physically and like, trying to predict upcoming events, I couldn't. It was like the imagery I was getting in my head was like I'm walking a path, but in my path there's like curtains on either side. Like
Okay.
when you're a little kid and you walk through like clothes and stuff like that because it's fun. Well, that was it. All I had for awareness was this my immediate space. And going
Hmm.
through 2013, basically, I was just walking through, and yes, the curtains parted as I walked, but just enough to give me space to move, right? So I couldn't sense anything. Well, that's the year my grandmother had cancer, and she died in the beginning of 2014. But I could, because if I'd have sensed it, right, I would have said, hey, you go to the hospital. But she's afraid to go to the hospital. Eventually, my sister convinced her because it was obvious, it was getting noticeable that there's something really wrong with her. But I could not pick up on anything. I was blocked
Hmm.
basically the whole year.
Wow. So you weren't allowed to intervene, basically.
Yes. And I
Yeah.
get that from time to time where I'm not allowed, where suddenly it's like I'm just kind of covered, and it's like, okay, this is not for you. It's but because I argue it's a courtesy because it's like you're obviously you're going to pick this up if we don't do anything, and because it's
Right.
someone close to you, you're going to intervene because they're close to you. So then
Hmm.
it's like here you can't know now.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That actually reminds me of a phenomenon, and I'm going to call it that, yeah.
Right.
Um, in nursing, like in my experience of nursing anyway,
Hmm.
that in the hospital wards, this is a very different situation to how it works in the
Right.
US. But anyway, in the hospital wards in the UK, we would be working with our patients, and every now and then one of us would say, we need to call the family of this one
Hmm.
because they got 24 hours, and
Yeah.
everybody knew that everybody knew. It was just one of those things you could tell when somebody had, you could get it down to like 24 to 48 hours typically.
Right.
People didn't usually stick around longer, but there was something I cannot define for you, but we all recognized it.
Hmm.
And that was something that was common to the nurses. It was really interesting. But we were very, in fact, I can't think, I was going to say rarely, but I can't honestly think of an occasion where we were wrong. And we'd call families and say,
Yeah.
you need to come and see grandma or whoever it was. Um, and they'd be asking, well, what's changed and what's happened? And it's like, just come. Nothing else to tell you, just come. And typically that would be really close to their last day. It would either be their last day or their penultimate day.
Right.
And it was something that you couldn't point to it scientifically, but it was a nurse's knowledge. We knew it, we could detect it. And
Yeah.
that was, I didn't know a nurse I worked with that didn't have it. We could all tell. It would take time in that position, and maybe we would see enough people pass that
Yeah.
you get
Well,
used to the,
I
the
was gonna
look or
say,
something.
yeah, I was gonna say for the listeners, and probably for you too. I heard about this book several years ago, so I don't remember the title or the person. Actually, I listened to the interview with the person who wrote it, and he was a doctor, and he put together a book of all these examples of doctors and nurses and other healthcare professionals who had all these intuitions
Mhm.
of these moments. And the guy himself gave an example of he was skiing, and then normally he would go down one path, but he felt compelled to go down another path at that time, and he's like, well, why would I want to go down there? But it was so strong, he decided to follow it, and he found someone who had hit a tree and had broken their leg,
Wow. Yeah.
and then he helped the guy because he's a doctor and he was right there and he could. So
And that
like,
was what he was sent there to do.
yeah. So like, there's even my sister-in-law was a PSW for a while, and her too. She says like there's all kinds of examples, even as PSWs, where you started to see all this weird phenomena with people who are dying, because she worked in a care home, so you knew when someone was gonna. Sometimes you had a good sense of when someone was gonna die, like, and then actually seeing phenomena, like,
Yeah. No, I remember getting into trouble one time. I was doing nights, and this one particular woman didn't have any family.
mm-hmm,
And I spent most of my shift sitting with her holding her hand because she didn't have anybody. She
yeah,
wanted somebody. And she wasn't talking overly much. And I was getting into a world of trouble for not doing all the other
yeah,
things. But we weren't in a rush on the ward, and I didn't see that that was more necessary than being with her. And by the end of my shift, she passed very sort
yeah,
of quietly. She wasn't struggling. She wasn't like fighting it or anything. She was just
mm,
relaxed, and I'm pretty sure that was because I was there holding her hand. I still got
right,
into trouble afterwards as well.
yeah,
It was like, but they didn't really understand the value of what I was doing the way I understood it. And it's something I would want. If I was in her position, I would want somebody to sit with me and hold my hand.
yeah,
So that was what I gave to her. But boy, I got flack for that. And that's just the difference between people seeing what they're seeing and
right,
people who are too busy looking at the schedule and stuff to,
mm-hmm,
making beds apparently is more important than, sitting and holding the hand of somebody who's dying.
yeah,
Yeah, weird, but we would get those experiences from time to time.
yeah. It's interesting though. trying to avoid the doing the and to get back to the but this so very much ties into the things aren't always what people think they are. Like people are looking at what you did as, oh, you're shirking your duty, you're not, but this
Right.
actually is your duty, frankly. Like if you really want to look at it, this is your duty. You're caring for those patients, and this is the final bit of care.
Right. No, I felt I was on point, but I was
Yeah,
accused of all kinds of, laziness and what
yeah,
have you. And that is all in the eye of the beholder, right? But I remember feeling so strongly that I needed to be sitting there because she had nobody.
yeah,
And that just it didn't feel right. She needed somebody to help her get to where she was going just by being there, just
yeah,
by her not being alone. And that was important. But like I said, I was surrounded by people that didn't really get that. Um, they could see that she was in her last 24 hours kind of thing.
mhm,
They just didn't get the importance of sitting there. So
yeah,
don't know why that story came up particularly, but it did. I can really picture her and I could pretty much smell the ward, which wasn't
yeah.
terrible. But there's a particular hospital smell, right?
Mm. Maybe
Yeah.
she's making her contribution to this episode.
Sorry?
Maybe she's making a contribution to this episode.
Hmm. Could be, could be. You
But
never know.
it is like, yeah, like, as we're both well aware of, even if we start with a topic, we don't necessarily fall within the confines of what's expected of that topic,
Very rarely.
right? Just so people know, I took a moment to point, as in the drive to point home of we talk and then we drift. And like we said a couple episodes now, even though we drift, everything always connects. Even without trying to make it connect, it connects. But yeah, things aren't always what they seem. And sometimes things aren't what we think they are because we're deceiving ourselves. Not because we're ignorant, but we just choose not to look at those things.
Or we feel we can't for
Yeah.
some reason. Like it's too far different from your current
Mm-hmm.
understanding to go there.
Yeah.
Because that requires changing things. It requires changing your view, maybe of yourself, of your role, um, mm, all kinds of things. Like I know people that can't change their mind because they're worried that it means something about them. And it's
Yeah.
like these two things are completely separate. Doesn't mean a damn thing. Your mind is made up of information from the environment. So if you change your
Mm-hmm.
mind, good for you. That's great. That's healthy. And you can change it as many times as information indicates is required. Um, here's a, here's a place where cultural conditioning gets in the
Mm-hmm.
way because I think everybody's heard that saying, nobody likes a quitter,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or words to that effect. So you've decided this thing, therefore you have to do this thing, or you have to
Right.
stick with this idea. And that is one of the biggest disservices we do to ourselves and each other, because it's so limiting. It's more
Yeah.
limiting than any other, quote unquote block you can think of, because you get stuck in infancy. You get stuck in these really early things.
Yeah.
And it translates to so many areas of life where you made a decision and now people expect you to stick to it. You start a 4-year degree. You're
Mm-hmm.
supposed to stick to it. Well, yeah, but at the start, I didn't have the information that I have 6 months in.
That's right.
And now I have a different decision to make. Or, marriage is one that causes all kinds of uproar in communities. But here's the thing, if you get married at 20, you're a different person at 25.
Yep.
You're a different person at 30, 35, 40. Like at any of these given points, what you went into ceases to exist and it's something else now. That might be okay for you and it might not. And yet we have this thing culturally and pretty much globally of,
Mm-hmm.
yes, but you entered into this, therefore you have to stay in it. It's like, but that doesn't make sense
Yeah.
because two people change and grow, hopefully, and it may
Hmm.
or may not be in the
Hopefully.
same direction. So why must it be that a decision you make when your executive functioning skills are barely online,
Hmm.
a decision you make then, you have to stick to it forever? Like, I think that's a very difficult one. Like, how can you assure that that's going to be the case? And why does everybody else feel invested in your decision? Isn't that interesting? But we do it to
Yeah.
ourselves. It's the ultimate limitation in life, right? Is you have to, you said yes, so you got to be there now. They say, yeah, but it's not what it was, or it's not what I thought it was. Any of those things, right? It's like, yeah, but people don't want to hear the but. It's just no, no, you're there. That's it. You're done. Wow.
Yeah.
You got stuck in the pigeonhole. Stay there.
That's the thing. And people forget, like, I know to I want to say not detriment because that's completely a wrong word, but my family over the years have become eventually used to me going from one thing to another and not understanding at the time why it's the way it is, but reaping the benefits of all the things I've learned and all the ways I've been able to connect what I've learned together. Now
Right.
they're starting to see it. So now I get more leeway. Now I get more respect for it. But in the beginning, everyone was like, why are you doing this? Why is this going this way? Why aren't you doing this other thing? Why did you quit this? Why did you, why didn't you give it your 100%, your all? And it's like, I have no idea because I still have no idea how this works. But later, when you
And
get enough experience,
sometimes
you see the connections and you see why it had to be that way. And it's like, oh, this is why.
and sometimes the thing that you're doing doesn't need 100%, it needs
Yeah.
5%, and
Yeah.
that's sufficient to change the trajectory or to complete the thing or to do whatever your part was.
Hmm.
And now you need to do something differently. And it's a cultural thing that comes over the top and says, yeah, but you can't change your mind, you can't quit, you can't do, and it's
Hmm.
other people telling you what you can and can't do. And this is absolutely a clue that that's something for you to put down on a seat somewhere, and you don't need to pick it up again because it's not yours. And it
Right.
gets in the way of your development and your path and your understanding. And it's one of those things that people find very difficult to leap from that space that they got stuck in to the one that they ought to be in by now
Right.
because time has gone through development and they need to be over here now. Um, and that works in so many places. And people make it mean things that it's interesting. It means something in their head. It doesn't mean anything for you, but they try and put it on you real fast. And that can look like so many things, whether it's relationships, jobs, places you live, the clothes you wear, the styles you go through, like whatever it is.
Hmm.
People will have an opinion on it, and they typically want you to stay where you were and not move.
Yeah.
So it's for anybody listening who has previously thought that this was about them. Um, that's the thing is it isn't. It never is. It's always about the lens of the person that's telling it to you. The person that's trying to stop you from being who you are or how you want to be, that is their problem. It's they're telling you it's yours, but it isn't. So don't pick it up. It's not yours.
Okay.
It's literally they got to work through that. That's their issue. And you don't have to own that.
Yeah. I like the way you word that. Don't pick it up. It's not yours.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, just leave that sucker right there. You don't have to do anything with that.
Yeah.
And it can be interesting if you can remove yourself to a place of objectivity to see how people lose their minds over this stuff. That can be, to use your word tonight, fun.
Yeah.
It's enlightening to see just the gyrations that people will go through to try and get you to conform to their view of you through their lens.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, no, I'm not doing that though. I was doing a doctorate program and I decided I literally I was working on it one evening and I thought, why am I doing this? And the answer came very quickly, because you can. And my response to myself was, well, that's a stupid ass reason for doing this doctorate. Why am I doing this? And all sorts of answers came up, and I didn't like any of them. I thought they were all kind of shallow. And I wasn't very impressed with myself for that. So I contacted the
Right.
university and said, it's been great, thanks, I quit. And all kinds of ramifications came from that one. And my poor mom, who was still with us
Mm.
at the time, was very upset and said, don't tell anybody, they'll think you're a quitter. And I was just fascinated. And I was like, but I have 4 degrees. Where am I a quitter? Well, you can't tell people you stopped this. Why not? What are they going to do about it? Why would they be upset? Why do they care? And she couldn't articulate it, but she was in a panic. And it was so interesting to see the responses of people. But you were
Yeah.
doing it. Why have you stopped? Because I didn't need it. I realized I wasn't going to use it. I didn't care about it that much. I was in it for the wrong reasons. And it just, none of those answers were the ones people wanted. But they were what they got, because that's what I had.
Mm.
And I've never regretted it in a day. I frequently forget I even did it. It's just like, okay, it was a thing, and I tried it for the wrong reasons, and I learned that I had the wrong reasons.
It's funny because you made me think about something now. All this talk about people not understanding things. So, like a lot of people, I think I get the view, right? The younger you are, the more open-minded you are, the more liberal you are, the more, and to a degree, this is true, right? Because you're trying to form an opinion, so you're trying to collect as much information as you can, and you may not view it the same way as the older generation, or the generation that came before you does. But what I find inevitably is that for most people, they act exactly the same way and have this and become the same kind of person they complained about when they were young. That, oh, you're not open-minded to things, you're closed off, you know. And then but when you sit there and you actually pay attention, you were always like that. Like you had the thing of youth where you didn't have enough information to pick a moment, to pick a thing to be stuck on.
Mm.
And once you had enough information to be stuck in that, you got stuck in it right away, just like the people you complained about.
Oh, well, parenting's a great one for that. I mean, how many people sort of will be parenting in some way, and then they say, "Oh, I just heard my mother come out
Yeah.
of my mouth," or I swore I'd never do that, and here I am doing it. And every parent ever, I think, has done that at some point to a greater or lesser degree. Some do decide that that's the way to go. And I'm going to say it rarely, if ever, is, because the generation you're currently parenting is not the same species as you. There has been an
Right.
evolution that is different. So you have to parent differently. But you'll have people who try really hard to make that work, and you'll have others that try really hard not to do it, but it happens anyway. So that's an example of exactly that, right? You complain about it, you don't like it, and then you go do it.
Yeah.
That
And
can be a
it's
thing.
yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to further add on because right now, the discourse on social media when it comes to Gen X is that all the Gen X coming out as we did all these things, we were rebels, and it's like some of us were. The rest of you are shrouding yourselves in the cloud that some of us actually developed, because the rest of you came into adulthood and turned just like everyone else, and basically became even antithetical to what a Generation X person is supposed to be.
It's interesting how
Yeah.
people will take on a persona, I
Mm-hmm.
think, and then they'll even express sort of certain opinions and thoughts that fit the persona and not necessarily fit their life experience or who
Yeah.
they are. Human beings are so fascinating because we do such weird ass things on this planet. And there are, when you dabble in different areas, so you go into the spiritual and you go, you play with the unseen as well as the seen,
Mm-hmm.
it's just extra layers of wow. It's just such an interesting time on this planet, and there's so much going on. It's
Well,
Wow.
Yeah, I was, that made me think of it from in some ways we're talking about it, like, okay, this is your warning, 2025, blah blah blah. But when you said that, it kind of made me think of this is exciting. If you really to jump into spirituality now, you are in a very living thing right now.
Oh,
That's
it's
exciting,
vibrant.
that's moving, that's alive, that's vibrant.
Yeah. The key though,
Mm.
to my awareness, the key is you have to be objective about it and not take it personally.
Right.
And if I could underscore the do not take it personally, that will alter the listener's experience tremendously. If you are a participant, but an objective one,
Hmm.
and if you observe the things that you're not directly involved in, but you don't make meaning of them, you just observe them to see what they are. 2025 and on is going to be a lot kinder to you than if
Yeah.
you take it personally. That
Uh,
would be my offering at this point is really don't take it personally. It's not about you. You just happen to
yeah.
be.
And even, but that offering of don't take it personally goes even further. Like every human being has gone through life, has their experiences, they have whatever's, as like to say their ancestors gave them and that. And then when you're aware of people's thought process, when you can actually kind of get the flow of how they're thinking, what their steps they're going through in their head, but they're just really going through an assessment process. So someone might look at you, right? And they might say, oh, someone wears glasses is a nerd. Or, this is an example because Kyla's wearing
Mhm.
glasses. I wear glasses too, but I don't wear them when I record because I can see the screen perfectly clear and my glasses get in the way. Kind of make it they overcorrect for close, so I don't wear them when I record. But the thing is, like there would be when you first start opening up and sensing those things, there is a big temptation to take it personally because
Mhm.
people are going through different things and they're assessing, do I like this? Do I not like this? Maybe they don't like something. But when the assessment is done and they've gone through everything that the checklist that they normally go through, that's intuitive to them, you can come out on top. And the things that they assessed during that period as bad, they might not even care about. But because you sensed when they hit that assessment and they had a negative reaction, like you can take that personally, but don't because that person's probably doesn't even remember making that assessment.
Well, the other thing is, even if they decide they don't like you, it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
matter. It's got nothing to do with anything. It's their lens and how they see you through it.
Yeah.
So we're not all going to suit everybody.
Right.
And the key is to not let that get in the way of
Mm-hmm.
being how you are. Some people will resonate and others won't, and that's
Mm-hmm.
perfectly natural. It's just we're hardwired to need to be in the crowd so that the saber-toothed tiger doesn't get us if we're out on
Yes.
our own. That's one part of it. And then also socially, we're conditioned to need external approval.
Mm-hmm.
And you really don't, actually. The only person that needs to approve of you is you. Because you're the one
Yes.
who's there. You're the one who's hopefully got your own back. And you're your harshest critic, etc., etc. So that's the only person you actually need to be concerned about because, newsflash, you have zero control over how somebody else perceives you.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with you. It's about you, but it's not to you. It's
Right.
just, it's not you. And they're only seeing the parts that they think they can see.
Mm-hmm.
You'll hear somebody say, oh, this person did this thing. That's not like them. And ever since I was a teenager, when I hear that, I'll say to people, well, yeah, it is. Otherwise, they wouldn't have done it.
Yeah.
You just didn't see that before. I've been saying that for as long as I can remember to people because it's always puzzled me. Why do you think somebody's doing something that is alien to them? Of course they're not. By definition, they're not. So it just means you didn't know that about them,
Yeah.
or they hadn't been challenged in that way. Like we all have an idea. If you saw a burning building, what would you do? And we all have an answer to that. And we are invariably a hero, right? And we save people and we do all the right things. Whereas your actual response might not
Mm.
be one that you consciously choose, right?
Yeah.
And you may run like hell in the other direction and forget to phone 911, for example. Um, how do you feel about that? Like it's just what would you do? And you don't know. You can give a guess, but you
Yes.
don't actually know yourself well enough to say what is like you. You're just gonna know at the time if you're ever challenged in that way. Otherwise, we have no idea. You see somebody getting bullied. Okay, here's a good one. You see somebody getting bullied, they're being
Hmm.
pushed around and given a hard time. You gonna step in and help? Ooh.
You know what? You brought that up, and I'm going to give you a bit of perspective on myself. So I have this philosophy: if somebody's being bullied and they're willing to fight for themselves, but they can't because like circumstances being what they are, outnumbered, they just don't have the capacity, but they have the will to do it, but they can't. I'll actually step in.
You sound like the voice of experience, though.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and that's my basic concept because if the person doesn't fight for themselves, I'm not fighting for them, which
Hmm.
is basically my thing. It's like I'll talk to them after it's over, but I'm like, the reason I didn't intervene is because it doesn't seem like you care. So if you don't care, why am I wasting my energy on doing it for you?
Interesting. See, that's a perspective that
Yeah.
I wouldn't have guessed at. Um, and that's all that means, is it's a
Yeah.
perspective I wouldn't have guessed at.
Yeah. Well,
So,
it's
but it is interesting because you don't know until you know, right?
well, and
But
because I've thought about sorry, I thought about this for a while, this reaction I have. And the conclusion I come to is that if the person doesn't fight for themselves, they're just going to fall back into that situation, right? It's like someone in an abusive relationship. They don't leave until they're ready to leave. So it doesn't matter how many times you intervene, how much energy you've spent in how much money, how much time, how much effort you've put into getting them out of the relationship. If they're not ready to leave, they're not going to leave.
I guess it depends on the tools you have available.
Yeah. Well, yes, I was going to say yes. If you have lots of money, you can just kidnap the person and get out and say, hey,
Or whatever you need in that
yeah,
situation,
right.
because that's a cycle that can be broken
Mm-hmm.
with the right perspective and information. So it
Yeah,
just depends on what you're bringing to the party. But again, that's the thing is nobody else knows what your toolkit is. So they make
yeah,
assumptions about what you're supposed to do, in air
right.
quotes, in a given situation. Um, and if you don't do that, then there's judgments going on. Or if you do something differently, then it's like, that's not like him.
Yeah,
But it clearly was. It's just that that's unknown information.
yeah. I'll give you. I have some good examples for this that make that give me. I find them humorous. So a lot of times when I speak with people, I'm always saying nice things about them. I'm encouraging and stuff like that. But then there's moments where I'm not, and then people have gotten so used to me being encouraging and positive will say, "I thought you were nice," and I'll say, "Who the hell told you I was nice? I never said I was nice. I said the closest thing I came to that was saying I was honest, and you're just surprised because all this time you've been benefiting from my honesty, and now that my honesty goes against what you were expecting, now you think I'm not nice."
Hmm, interesting.
I
See?
mean, I would argue I'm at least a kind person, but even then, sometimes.
So
But
the listener is getting
yeah,
a really good sort of view
yeah,
of different facets that
hmm
they might not be aware of, and 5 minutes ago wouldn't have guessed at even.
right,
And yet there they are. And that's the thing. We all have those. We
yeah,
all have a whole bunch of things that what would you do in that given situation?
yeah.
To bring
Well,
up another
mm,
really emotive subject, because that seems to be the way I roll, abortion, right?
mm,
Pro-choice versus pro-life. Well, Pro-choice is, I think, the only realistic way to go because you have no idea what's going on for the person whose
Right.
decision you're trying to take away. So it's not for you to judge one way or the other. If you don't like abortions, don't have one. But you can't take that away from somebody else because you
That's
are
right.
not dealing with their life and their situation. And, Texas has an abortion ban, and two women have died recently
Mm,
because they couldn't get care. One was 18. And
yeah.
this has been directly related to they needed abortions, the medical reasons couldn't have, and they died. Is that pro-life?
No.
No, it certainly isn't. Are the amount of guns we have over here pro-life? No, it certainly isn't. So, I could go on this one for quite a while,
Yeah.
but it's just question of your lens, right?
Yeah. Well, it kind of falls into the idea that labels mean nothing because it depends how you label something. Like some labels are necessary because you're trying to communicate, but
Hmm.
some labels you're trying to communicate something that's not true.
Yes.
Like, with abortion, you could say you're pro-life because you don't want to see a fetus, but okay, then are you prepared to take over responsibilities for that child when they're born because that person can't give that unborn child, an existence beyond being inside their body. And maybe even then they can't really do that because they don't have the means to even feed themselves properly. And then when they're born, are you willing to maybe curtail gun laws because school shootings and all, and maybe something more should be done? Like if you're pro-life, then these are things that you need to consider.
Right. There is a difference between
Right.
pro-birth and pro-life.
That's right. People should be
And
calling themselves pro-birth. If you're going to be exact and you're going to speak
uh-huh.
clearly about what you believe pro-birth.
Yes. And that's problematic right there. But it's also, again, you're taking over somebody else's free will.
Mhm.
You're taking over their choice, and that never ends well. So, yeah, that just came up as something to put out there. I don't usually talk about abortion, but I do have very strong views that it is not your decision for somebody else's body. It just isn't. On
Well,
any subject, it just isn't.
that's the thing. And interestingly enough, I actually get pushback from women on this. I say, listen, like, yes, it takes, a male and a female to create a baby. But my final position on this matter is that the woman gets the final choice because she's the one carrying the baby and she's the one taking the biological risk that comes
Well, yeah.
with carrying a baby. So even if I wanted the child to be born, I'm not in jeopardy. My
Mhm.
part in procreation has ended. So I'm not the one with the ongoing responsibility of maintaining that life, other than to provide and bring in food if necessary, and a place if I'm still our relationship was that, you know?
Or
Yeah,
anyway, because if they
yeah,
exist, they need feeding. But
right.
I can't imagine a pushback on that really, because that is the fact. It's like
Yeah.
if you have an infected appendix, if you have an infected
Hmm.
appendix,
Yeah.
it is your choice to have that dealt with. It is not somebody
Hmm.
else's choice, right? Well, that's life-threatening too.
Yeah.
But nobody else is going to tell you what you got to do. So, it's yes, we're talking something that could become a life, etc., etc. But you can't take out the mother's or the woman's
Right.
well-being in this, and you can't
Yeah.
make that decision for her because she's the one that gets to live with it
Right.
or
And that's the
die with
thing,
it,
right?
depending, right?
Because there's consequences to your body every time there's a pregnancy. There's always these issues that can happen. Yes, if handled properly, pregnancies usually happen and people move on with their lives. But that's not in every circumstance. And modern society and our modern way of doing things a lot of times gets in the way with proper birthing.
Well,
And yeah.
I know someone who has recently had an ectopic pregnancy.
Hmm.
Well, if
Yeah.
she's in a state, luckily she's not, but if she was in a state where abortion was banned, she would die
Right.
straight up because they don't differentiate between the requirements or the rules or the reasons. So this is one of those instances where culture and force majeure steps in
Hmm.
and says, well, I'm the boss of you.
Yeah.
And 2025 needs to be about changing that. That's not how it works.
Right.
That's not how it rolls. And it doesn't roll very well when we try and enforce that. And
Right.
people die. And it's not pretty. So let's not.
Yeah.
That's my
So
contribution on
yeah.
that one.
But this ties back to what I said about how I treat bullying, because in the end, it's not my choice how you deal with the situation. But if you have the will to change the situation, but you can't because of the circumstances, then I'm willing to help. But I'm not making that decision for you. And it's in kindness, because if in my attempt to help you at all costs, you don't learn what you need to learn to get yourself not bullied in the first place, I've done you no favors, you know? And then, of course, when you follow the flow of things and certain things need to happen, some of it too comes from my ability to perceive the flow and what people need too. But the idea is, I'm not robbing you of your opportunities. Basically, I need you to consent, at least in the way the spiritual world views consent, in that you have to take efforts, and then I will lend to your efforts.
Hmm. See, now that's an interesting perspective.
And
Well,
it's because I don't have the right to tell you to do things.
I think we've given people a lot of
Yeah.
things to consider, different ways of looking at it. And
Mm-hmm.
what
It's
is,
not always what you think.
what are you going to make that mean?
Yeah.
And that's a question I will often ask people is, well, what are you making it mean?
Mm-hmm.
And at first there's a little bit of, well, what do you mean? What am I making it mean? It means this.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's what you're making it mean.
Mm-hmm.
Because nobody else is. It's your perception. You know, there's a system in life coaching that
Mm-hmm.
I'm also certified in, and I use from time to time. And one of the things it starts with, or the thing it starts with, is the circumstance that is the problem, right? So, say somebody died. Well, is that always a bad thing? And, some people will say, well, that's not a circumstance, that's a terrible event and how awful and da
Right.
da da. Is it though? Because if you don't know the person, you've never seen them, met them, heard of them, but you know that someone died,
Mm-hmm.
how does that affect you? Not a whole heap, right? If
Yep.
it's somebody really close to you, then that means a whole lot of other things. You make it mean a whole lot more because it
Yeah.
does. It's close, this is closer to you. So when you make something mean a thing, you have thoughts about it based on that.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're happy because that was a terrible person and they did a whole bunch of awful things and yay, thank goodness, finally, then your thoughts and your emotions are going to be based from that perspective. Likewise, if it's terribly sad and all the rest of it, your thoughts, your emotions are going to be based on that perspective. Your actions come from your feelings. You act on your emotions. So that will then get you your results. And that's the sequence that everything works through. But an event is only given attributes when everybody in the world would agree on it.
Mm.
And there's very few things that fit that bill. Otherwise, it's something you make mean a given thing. It's
Yeah.
kind of interesting because it really breaks down how we perceive problems and it forces you to be more objective because, well, okay, you make it mean that. What else could it be? And
Yeah.
what else could it be? And how else could you look at it? And how would that person see it? And so on. And you can dissect until it loses the hold so that you can then look at it.
Yeah. It's given the nature of our podcast, it makes me think of the perception of witches. Right
Okay.
now in modern society, especially in popular fiction, there's this big split. There's like actually it's weird. In anime, if you like that kind of thing, I do. A
Hmm.
lot of times witches are the pinnacle of magic users.
Right.
and they're very revered, whether they're good or bad. There's no good or bad attribute to them. There's just, but you also get people who don't want to be identified as witches, even if they do witchy things, because of the generations handed down of witches are bad.
Oh yeah. And I mean if you come from a religious family, then they're going to be bad.
And I even want to tie it into just because there was after a while not just witches but anyone who did like a whole prohibition in Christianity on anyone who does anything beyond church related prescribed spiritual slash magical practices are all considered bad and evil. But I want to kind of touch on something from what I said was like me saying that I only help someone if they want to do it. Some people who say no, you always have to help will look at me and say no, you're bad. But I'm like, but I'm serving a greater good here because if that person's not prepared to fight for themselves, I'm not helping them. I'm just adding to their problem because they're not willing to fight for themselves. When I'm gone, the people who are picking on them are going to be worse and they're going to suffer more for it because they're not prepared to stand up for themselves. So they're going to be more vulnerable to the harm that comes later.
Hmm.
And I'll give you an example of this.
Okay.
I used to work I think I mentioned this before. I used to work at a place where we did family therapy.
Hmm.
So when this takes place this will be relevant in a moment. So I was doing my laundry at a laundromat, and there was a couple, and this clearly domestic violence is the course of action in the household. The minute the whatever husband boyfriend walked in, it was just thick in the air. The lady was there doing her laundry, and her son was like 2 or 3. He was just at a point he could just talk, and he was like really tiny, and so he was playing the floor as lava. And so he's standing on the tables and he's standing on the chairs. And the guy comes in and he's just like, sit down or I'll throw you against the wall. And I'm like, I didn't say anything because I saw how the woman was reacting and she was being very timid, and she was kind of taking his side, but she was trying to placate the child. And I'm like, so I sat there and I just kind of watched, kind of like, I didn't say anything, and then I went to work the next day because I did my laundry on Sunday. So, anyways, not that that's relevant. And then the workers were saying, well, why didn't you say anything? And I'm like, to what? I'm going to say something. Judged by her body language, from what I could understand, she was going with him anyways. And now he's going to go home. He was embarrassed because I pointed something out, you know, maybe or not made him feel stupid or made him feel threatened. So he takes it out on her and the kid. I'm like, what was the benefit of me saying something? My assessment of the situation was he's just going to go home and beat shit out of her. So, and he might because maybe he noticed me looking at him, watching the situation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's such a tough one. That
So
is
I said, why would I have done something? What would have been gained like from this?
that is a question worth asking. Yeah, that is definitely a question worth asking.
Like she
Hmm.
didn't come to me and say, "Hey, can you help me?" She didn't show any. She didn't look at me pleadingly. She didn't do any of those things. She just dealt
Well,
with her
no,
husband, dealt
but
with the child, and then they finished their stuff and they left.
yeah. But typically when somebody's
Yeah,
being abused, they don't behave the way
no,
logic would dictate.
right,
However, I would agree that your point is valid in what would that have done? That is a really good question. What would your intervention have done? That is a good point.
right. And I
It's a
didn't have the
tough one.
resources to take on a woman and a child to hide her from her husband, or you know what I mean. Like
Yeah, no, it that's a tough one. That is a tough
my
one.
intervention would have been incomplete and would have probably led to harm to her and her child.
Uh-huh.
I was
Yeah.
kind of surprised that they had asked me why I didn't do anything. I'm like, well, what would you want me to have done?
I'm not surprised they asked, but I think your answer was a very thought-provoking one because it's a good point. People don't tend to think it through to that level. Um, but no, what would the outcome have been? That's a really good point.
It's the
You know that saying, discretion is the better part of
yeah,
valor? Sometimes it is.
yeah. It's not the sexier part of valor, but it is the effective part of valor.
Well, yeah. sometimes that's what you need to do.
Yeah. But I've run into kind of similar situations before. I was at least at some point the guy that people thought, you know what, we need someone beat up, we'll call on you. And so I've been asked to intervene in people in abusive relationships before, and I'm like, are they ready to leave? Nope. So then I'm gonna go there. I beat them up. I'm the asshole because then
Interesting.
she goes back with them, and then everyone's got to pretend like, oh no, it's fine. And now I'm the guy who did something, so now I'm the guy who's the bad guy. I'm like, no, I said it doesn't benefit me, but that's not my concern. But it doesn't benefit the person I'm supposedly helping, and then has the secondary side effect of definitely not benefiting me. So
Yeah, what a more people make things so complicated. They
yeah.
really do.
But it's the like I said, if someone is willing to go and they have a plan and they have an escape strategy and they need someone to run interference, hey, I
Right.
mean, I'm not the paragon of that I used to be at this point, and I need to do some work on myself before I act as a shield for anyone again. But I mean,
Okay.
like I was always willing to act as shield. It's just that, but if you're not running, if you have nowhere to go, why am I getting beat up, or why am I, risking arrest? Why am I risking all these things? And I'm not doing that to not want to help. I'm just, is my help going to be helpful? Because if I intervene now and get arrested and someone puts a restraining order, how do I help you later?
Good point too, and not one I would have anticipated you
Right.
needed, but I see that. That's pretty wild. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I like the way you think it through to a logical conclusion. That's, like I said, that's not something people typically do.
No, but
But,
it is something I want people to start taking a look at.
uh-huh. No, it's really valid. And I would add for people listening who want to try what you've just
Mm,
described, tread cautiously on that path simply because you don't want to be distracted into using it as an excuse for inaction where
right.
action would have been helpful. So
That's the
that,
point, right? I didn't use it to excuse not doing anything. I used it to try to figure out, is it this the right thing to do at this time?
right. And I'm just sort of drawing
Yeah.
attention
No, and
to,
you're right.
okay, be aware
Yes,
that that's not a sort of catch-all to get you out of
that's right.
responsibility or the need to use what you have available when the outcome could reasonably be expected to be good. It's not that. It's like it's more awareness of when you're going to use your strengths
Yeah,
versus when you know to hold back and bide your time a little.
yeah.
And that's,
Well,
yeah, it's a really key point because and it's also a great illustration of things not always being what it seems.
yeah.
So you might not be jumping into the fray and therefore, oh, coward or
Hmm.
bad man or whatever the terminology is, but actually the thought process is one that went to a conclusion that saw no good outcome from jumping in. Therefore, why would you jump in? I think that's a really
Yes,
good point to keep in mind and clarity of intention here.
yeah,
Using it as an excuse to sort of save your ass is less noble, shall we say,
yeah,
than processing it through to a point where you realize, okay, nothing good is going to come from me taking action here. So I'll just be here and not take the action. That's so interesting. That opened up a whole thing right there.
yeah. Well, thank you. But that's like, so this is one of those times where I will take the title of wizard with fully into my chest, because it's like I want, my ego is not in the way. I want to get the ideal, I want to get the outcome that you're actually looking for. And if it, like, even if my ego takes a hit, right? That's not what I'm trying to accomplish. I'm trying to accomplish the thing that you actually want to do. And the reality is, and for people who do have the ego still as an issue, think about this. If you actually solve the problem, that's more ego boosting than failing constantly. Because I've also done failing constantly.
Ye-
But that's in a different way. But that's from
Egos,
just me trying to, like I said, because I had a club foot, so it made me slower than everyone else. And so I would go into races constantly and I would lose all the time. But over time, I got better and then I started winning races. But it took a lot of losing and a lot of hits to the ego to get there.
ego is a fascinating subject that I
Yeah.
think we should do in another podcast
Hmm.
because ego is a construction
Yeah.
of your own using other people's materials,
Right.
right? It's who you think you are based on the reflection from other people. And then maybe there's some of your own input in there, but as a kid, certainly not.
Right.
It really comes from outside. And we, ego is definitely a construct.
Hmm.
I didn't get that from a science thing. That's just something
No, but it
I'm
is, right?
I'm coming up with as we talk. But that came through very strongly that it's one of those illusions that we hang on
Yeah.
to. Like it's
Yeah.
important that this is who I am. This means I'm a winner. This means, whatever, whatever. But does it though? Because it doesn't. Doesn't mean a damn thing actually, unless you make it mean it for a while. But ego is so interesting. We hang on to it, but it's an illusion.
Yeah.
It's not important.
Right. And so now the assignment is to go get a trickster teacher who runs you through everything that forces you to deal with your ego and actually find out how to do things efficiently. Now, I don't recommend it, but and I was being
Well,
facetious. I don't recommend anyone go and get a trickster. You have to be very prepared to deal with the trickster.
I would just say, ask yourself a question
Yes.
whenever there's an aspect of ego coming up. What would it mean if this wasn't true? Or what else could be true? Ask it however lands well for you, but just examine. So, what does that mean? Why is it important? Does that have to be the thing? Like I said, ask it the way you want to, but
Hmm.
what else could be true? I kind of like that one because it opens the possibility door again and says, well, what else is here?
Yeah.
As you've decided on a bunch of characteristics that are you and you're attached to them, but do they serve you the best? Are they the most interesting to you? Do you actually want them? Or did you just pick them up because somebody threw them at you?
Yeah. That's I had a point there, but I'm being withheld for a minute.
Okay.
There's probably something a better wording than what I was going to use.
Well, maybe we need to do it in a different podcast episode because this one's gone a good 2.5 hours.
Has it?
Yep.
I got stuff in the way here on my screen. Oh yeah. No, you're right. All right. This is probably then a good place to stop, and that's why I was being hesitated.
Yeah, could be. Could be. I mean, we just gave an assignment too, so.
Yeah. Well, I don't really want people to go out and find a trickster, but I do want them to be their own trickster.
And to ask the questions.
Yes.
Questions are key to getting different answers.
Because that's literally all tricksters really do. They may ask it in a way and at a point where you're not ready to answer them to maximize the emotional intensity of the moment to force you to get you to find an answer. So yeah, do like a trickster without the getting in your own way part. But yes, ask yourselves those questions. How do you,
Hmm.
yeah, actually, you're right, because the biggest, it's not what it seems, is yourself. This is the biggest one to figure out what it is.
Yeah.
It is the biggest one to figure out.
And if you ask yourself those questions, then you're getting ahead of the curve. Nothing's having to make you question that. You're doing it voluntarily.
Mm,
Then, okay, what else does that mean? Like you think you're a good person. Okay, cool. What does that mean?
mhm,
And good for whom? Good to whom? Um, are you scoring brownie points? Like, what are we talking here? When I worked in an orphanage in
mm,
Bangladesh, I went there because I thought it was going to be really cool and a very interesting thing to do, and I was totally ready for it. But I went anticipating that I would thoroughly enjoy what I was doing,
right.
and I did. But when I got there, there were some people working in the same place. We were all volunteering. There were some people in there who literally articulated out loud that they were good people and scoring brownie points for heaven. The
Yeah.
last part is my language, but that was basically, look at me, I'm such a good person. I'm sacrificing myself. Pardon me, but bullshit. Nobody decides to do something because they think they're going to have a hard time. Like, you don't
Yeah.
say, I'm going to hate this, so I'm going to do it. No, you chose it because that seemed like a good choice to you. So let's not sugarcoat it as being,
Yeah.
a brownie point for heaven. But that's my lens. Their lens disagreed.
Yeah. But you said something very important. So there's two ways of looking at difficult. One is you don't want to do it, right? So you won't choose to do it. But there's when you really want to do something, you view it as a challenge that you want to surmount. And so two people can be in basically the same situation, having the same struggles, but one actually wants to be there and actually wants to surmount the struggles, and the other person is kind of suffering through it.
Yeah, it's a lot of it is in the questions you ask.
Mm-hmm.
One is, okay, how am I going to get this done? And the other one is, oh no, look at all these obstacles. What did I do to deserve that? It's like, well, can you see which one's going to move? Because
Mm,
I can.
yeah.
So, yeah, ask those questions.
You know what else? I want to add something to this assignment because this is going to be 2025 when this comes out. And the point of 2025 is to really, the whole core, if I could distill it down for the spiritual to the non-spiritual, is be yourself. So my addendum to the assignment is not just ask yourself, are you what you think you are? Ask other people that you know aren't spiritual because they're not going to listen to this podcast, so they're not going to hear this assignment. So even if you can with people around you, start trying to see if you can get people to be who they are. Not force them, but ask questions that with curiosity, with genuine curiosity. I'm never going to ask you to do anything just because I tell you to do it. Do it because you really want to do it, because you genuinely care and you generally want a good outcome. I think that's about as much as I can spin that in a positive way.
Okay, there's a bunch of elements to this assignment.
Yeah. Because there's not just yourself, right? People who aren't looking to be witches, wizards, whatever, who aren't looking to live in the spiritual world, they still have, a chance for good outcomes too, even though there's a lot of hard things coming. But they need to do it by being who they are and not who
Yes.
other people think they should be. Because that's really the problem is everyone is being kind of basically pushed to not be themselves. So everyone from these have zero spirituality to you're ready to ascend to the next plane, just kind of dissolve away into fairy dust and move on to the next plane. Everyone has to be themselves.
Boom.
Yep.
That's a
And
mic
that is a
drop.
good place to end the episode. So before we jump into anything else, I'm Daniel Dubois.
I'm Michaela Gappenstone.
And until next time.
Until next time.